The phone rang just as I was drifting off, that strange gray space between waking and dreaming, where, for a few seconds, I still forgot my husband was dead. I blinked at the glowing numbers on the bedside. Clock, 11:47 p.m. No one calls with good news. At 11:47 p.m. My first thought was Derek or Sienna. Some crisis with the grandkids. Some late-night panic about paperwork or insurance. My second thought was a wrong number. Anything ordinary. Anything that didn't involve loss. Hello? My voice sounded thin in the dark. Mrs. Ellison, this is Harold Collins, from Collins & Sons Funeral Home. The funeral director. His voice was as familiar now as the hum of my refrigerator. I stared at the ceiling, suddenly wide awake. Yes, Mr. Collins, is something wrong with the arrangements? There was a pause on the line. Just breathing. That pause scared me more than any words. No, ma'am, nothing like that. His tone was formal at first, the same polished professionalism he used when he guided me through casket choices and flowers. I'm very sorry to disturb you at this hour. I sat up, the sheet pooling around my waist, my hand automatically reaching to the other side of the bed, cold, empty still. What is it? When we were preparing the final documentation this evening, we discovered something. He cleared his throat. Something in Mr. Ellison's suit jacket pocket that we missed before. My heart stuttered. What kind of something? I'd rather not go into detail over the phone. The formal tone cracked a little, an edge of something else slipping through. Worry. Mrs. Ellison, I really think you should come down here as soon as possible. Now, I looked at the clock again, as if it might argue with him. Almost midnight, the house quiet, the neighborhood asleep. Yes, ma'am. Now, I swallowed. Can this not wait until morning? Another pause, this one longer, heavier. I wouldn't advise that, he said softly. That's something in the way he said it made the back of my neck prickle. If it's something important, I can call my son, have him drive me down, or my daughter. They know. His voice sharpened so suddenly, I pulled the phone away from my ear. I mean, forgive me, but I need you to come alone. Alone. The word felt too big in my mouth. Why? On the other end, I heard him exhale, like he'd made some kind of decision. Mrs. Ellison, he said, dropping his voice to a low, urgent tone I had never heard from him before. Whatever we found, it may concern your family. Until you've seen it yourself, please don't tell your kids you're coming here. Don't tell anyone. My grip tightened around the phone. You're scaring me. I don't mean to frighten you, he said, but I'm afraid if the wrong person finds out about this before you do, you could be in danger. In danger. The words landed in my chest like a stone. Listen, I said, my voice suddenly shaking. If you're watching this right now, you're probably thinking, lady, hang up and call the police. And maybe you're right. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But that night, sitting there in my empty bed, I did what grieving widows do best. I made the worst possible choice. I swung my legs out of bed and felt for my slippers. Where are you watching from? I asked quietly, half to myself, half to the stranger in my imaginary audience. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because this is the part where my whole life rips open. 3 days earlier, my life had still been normal, or what passes for normal. When you've been married to the same man for 39 years, and the biggest argument you've had lately was about whether the thermostat really needed to be at 60-8. It was a Thursday night, I remember, because it was book club night. And the ladies had spent 40 minutes arguing about whether the main character should have left her husband. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had opinions about fictional marriages and zero preparation for my own ending. The house was mostly dark, only the faint glow under the door of Rick's home office spilling into the hallway. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, hung my coat on the hook, and called out, Rick, I brought home the last of the lemon bars, if you didn't eat already. No answer. Typical, I thought. When he got absorbed in work, a marching band could parade through the living room, and he wouldn't notice. I toed off my shoes, the familiar creak of the floorboard by the hall closet greeting me like a tired old friend. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the scented plug-in Sienna had insisted on buying us. Something with ocean breeze in the name that mostly smelled like chemicals and wishful thinking. Rick, I tried again as I walked down the hallway. His office door was half closed. Light spilled around the frame like a little rectangle of day pasted into our night. I pushed it open with my fingertips, already rehearsing the playful complaint I'd give him for staying up too late again. He was there, in his chair, facing the desk. His reading glasses sat on the bridge of his nose, tilted just enough to look wrong. The lamp cast a pool of yellow light across the paperwork in front of him, highlighting neat columns of numbers and his precise handwriting. A mug of coffee sat within arm's reach. A dark ring dried on the wood where it had been sitting too long. "Did you fall asleep in here again?" I shook my head, half exasperated, half amused, stepping closer. "Come on, old man, your back is going to hate you in the morning." I touched his shoulder. Cold. Not just room temperature cool. Not dozed off 4 hour cool, dead cold Rick. My voice cracked. I shook him harder. His head lolled forward, unresponsive, a marionette whose strings were cut. His glasses slid down and landed on the desk with a soft clack. The next few minutes came in. Shards. My hand slapping at the phone on the counter. The operator's calm voice as I stumbled over our address. The wail of sirens slicing through our quiet Ohio street. Paramedics pushing past me. A blur of navy uniforms and a bright red bag. "Ma'am, step back." Was he complaining of chest pain? "When did you find him?" I answered, but it felt like someone else's voice. Someone older, someone far away. They hooked him up to machines, pressed pads to his chest, spoke in terse phrases that meant nothing and everything, and then they stopped. One of them, a man with kind eyes and tired shoulders, turned to me. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. It looks like he suffered a massive heart attack. Massive, like an ocean wave, knocking me off my feet." "It was quick," he added, as if that were a consolation prize. No suffering. No suffering for him, maybe. For me, it was like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of my house. The walls were still standing, but nothing was holding them up. People kept saying natural causes, like that made it less obscene, that my husband was here one minute, gone the next. Like 62 was a perfectly reasonable age to fold your hands and die at your desk. The next 3 days, blurred together, casseroles marching into my kitchen, in an endless parade of sympathy, phone calls, flowers, a dizzying number of choices no one should have to make while their heart is breaking. "What do you think about lilies, Mrs. Ellison?" Mr. Collins had asked gently. "They're very traditional." "Lilies are fine," I'd said. Everything was fine, according to me. The casket was fine. The hymn selection was fine. The photos Derek chose for the slideshow were fine. I didn't feel fine. Derek swooped in on day one, briefcase in hand, suit perfectly pressed even in grief. At 38, he was every inch the successful attorney, the kind of man people trusted on sight. "Mom, don't worry about any of this," he said, taking the folder of insurance papers right out of my hands. "I'll handle the bank accounts, the will, the pension, all of it." "I can sign my own name," I'd protested weakly. "Of course you can." He gave me the same patient smile he used on difficult clients. "But you don't have to. That's the point. Just let me take care of you for once. Let me take care of you." It should have been comforting. Instead, it made me feel like a piece of fragile glass someone had put on a high shelf out of the way. Sienna showed up with a different arsenal. At 35 in her scrubs and ponytail, she still looked 12 to me. Except my 12-year-old had never carried a pill organizer. "Mom, grief is exhausting at your age," she said, flipping open a little plastic case at my kitchen table. "Days before the funeral. You need rest. Your body can't handle this kind of stress like it used to." "I'm 64, not 90, I snapped, "and I don't need to be sedated to cry for my husband." She frowned. "All medical concern. These will just help you sleep. One at night, that's it." Little white pills, sitting in my palm like a choice I wasn't ready to make. "I'm fine," I said, closing my fingers around them and walking to the sink. That phrase had become my automatic setting, a reflex. "Really, I'm fine." I flushed them when she went to the bathroom, watched them swirl away, feeling petty and stubborn and old all at once. The day of the funeral, the church was packed. Our small town turned out in black suits and dark dresses, shoes polished, voices hushed. They hugged me and told me stories about Rick, the time he stayed late to help a client sort out a mess at the IRS, the meals he delivered to shitins from the church, the way he always remembered people's kids' names. "A good man," they said, "salt of the earth." I sat in the front pew, the smell of lilies wringing my stomach like a rag. Sienna's chosen hymn floated through the sanctuary, her voice catching on the high notes, making people dab at their eyes. Derek stood at the pulpit later and delivered a eulogy so polished even the pastor looked impressed. He was the best father a son could ask for. Derek said, his voice thick with emotion, "and the kind of husband most men will never manage to be." Everyone said it was beautiful. I barely heard it. I watched my children up there and thought, who am I, if I'm not Rick's wife? Who is Maggie Ellison alone? After the burial, after the last clump of dirt hit the shiny new casket, the crowd thinned. Back home, the casseroles continued to multiply like a science experiment gone wrong. Sympathy cards stacked up on the kitchen counter. Neighbors dropped by with flowers, hugging me too tightly, whispering, call if you need anything. Derek hovered with documents. We should really talk about refinancing the house now that Dad's gone, he said one night, spreading papers across the kitchen table. Sienna hovered with pills. You're not sleeping, Mom. I can see it in your eyes, she insisted. Just let me help you. I'm fine, I said, again and again, until the words meant nothing. On the third night, after the last neighbor left and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I stood in the kitchen and realized I couldn't take one more well-meaning person in my house. I turned to my children. You both need to go home, I said, to your own families, your own beds. Mom, Derek started. I mean it. My voice surprised me with how firm it sounded. I need to be alone tonight. They didn't like it, but they left. Hugs at the door, promises to call in the morning. When the door shut behind them, the house exhaled. The quiet rushed in like a tide. I walked to the bedroom. His side of the bed was still unmade. The dent of his body fossilized in the mattress. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand next to his book, spine cracked at chapter 12. His robe hung on the back of the bathroom door, as if he might step out of the shower any minute and reach for it. Every room had fingerprints of him. The mug he always used, the jacket hanging over the back of his chair, the faint smell of his aftershave in the closet. I crawled into bed on my side alone and stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny dots in the texture like they might add up to something. I don't know when I finally drifted off, just that the phone dragged me back. 11:47 p.m. Mrs. Ellison, this is Harold Collins. Now I stood in my dark bedroom, one hand still on the empty space beside me, the other gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. I'll come, I heard myself say. Give me 15 minutes. Thank you, ma'am. Used the side entrance. I'll be waiting for you. We hung up. The silence in the room roared. I dressed in the same black sweater I'd worn to the funeral, pulled on jeans and the heavy coat I kept for Ohio winters that never quite ended when the calendar said they should. When I opened the front door, the night air slapped me awake, cold and sharp in my lungs. The street was empty, the houses dark, just the soft hum of my car when I turned the key, the dashboard lights flickering to life. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I saw myself the way strangers might, a tired woman with grief carved into the lines around her mouth, hair hastily pulled back, eyes too bright. If you're still here, I murmured to the invisible listener in my head, this is the part where you start yelling at the screen. Don't go. Call the police. Wake your kids. But I didn't, I said softly, because no one had told me yet that my children might be the reason I was in danger. I turned onto the main road. The town slid past in silent snapshots. The darkened grocery store. The church where we'd buried Rick that morning. The florist's shop with its sympathy arrangements available sign dim in the window. Streetlights cast long pools of yellow on the pavement, the beams of my headlights cutting through them like a tunnel dot. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from the cold, from the echo of his words. Please don't tell your kids. You could be in danger. As the funeral home came into view at the end of the road, its white columns and manicured shrubs looking strangely ominous in the moonlight, my heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. I pulled into the empty parking lot and turned off the engine. For a second, I just sat there, listening to the ticking of the cooling car and the thud of my own pulse. Then, I took a breath, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold, walking toward the building where my husband's body lay, and where a secret in his pocket was apparently worth killing for. The glass door gave a little resistance before it opened, like even the building was reluctant to let me in at that hour. Collins and Sons looked different at midnight. In the daytime it was soft carpets, warm lights, and murmured condolences. Tonight, the front lobby was dark, lit only by a green exit sign and the weak spill of a single lamp from somewhere down the hall. The air was colder, two-threaded with the faint, stale mix of lilies and chemical disinfectant. It smelled like grief and bleach. Mrs. Ellison, Harry Collins appeared from the shadows of the side hallway, still in his suit, tie loosened, hair slightly mussed. For the first time, he didn't look like a calm professional in control of everything. He looked rattled, double quotes, Thank you for coming so quickly, he said. His voice was low, like the walls might be listening. I pulled my coat tighter around me. You said it couldn't wait. No, ma'am, it can't. His eyes flicked briefly toward the viewing rooms, their doors closed, silent. Please, this way. He didn't lead me toward the chapel or the room where Rick had lain earlier that day, surrounded by flowers and polite crying. Instead, he guided me down a narrow back corridor I'd never noticed before, the carpet muffling our footsteps. Dim red exit signs glowed over the doors, bathing the hallway in a faint emergency light hue. If this starts to feel like the beginning of a horror film, I murmured in my head, imagining all of you watching this from your couches or phones. You're not wrong. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed. Somewhere, a refrigeration unit kicked on with a low, mechanical groan that made my skin crawl. Harry opened a door near the end of the hall and gestured me inside. It was a small office, no flowers, no soft lighting, just a metal desk, a computer, 2 chairs, and a reading lamp casting a tight circle of yellow over the desktop. On that desk sat a clear plastic evidence bag. Whatever was inside it had brought me here at midnight. Please, sit. He waited until I lowered myself into the chair before taking the one across from me. For a moment he just rested his hands on the desk, fingers interlaced, like he was bracing himself. I apologize again for the late hour, he said, but after what we found, I felt it was safer to contact you when your family wasn't around. Safer? I stared at him. Mr. Collins, you keep using words that don't belong in a sentence with funeral arrangements. What's going on? He slid the evidence bag toward me with 2 careful fingers. Inside were 2 things, a tight bundle of folded papers, and a small, sleek device about the size of a flip phone. Black casing, tiny screen, a single red button, dot. It looked disturbingly like something from a true crime podcast thumbnail. We discovered these, he said, in the inside pocket of your husband's suit jacket. My husband kept notes in his pockets all the time, I said automatically, trying for normal, grocery lists, client reminders, things he'd forget if he didn't write them down. Why would that be? Dangerous. The pocket itself was sewn shut from the inside. Harry's eyes met mine. Whoever put these there didn't want them found, at least not easily. I swallowed. Sewn shut. Yes, ma'am. We don't normally open altered interior seams. We only found it because one of my assistants noticed an unusual stiffness when we were moving the body earlier. When we cut the lining, this fell out. He tapped the bag. My fingers felt clumsy as I reached for it. The plastic crinkled under my grip. I focused on the papers first, because the little black device made something cold crawl up my spine. Harry was already pulling on latex gloves with the practiced efficiency of someone who spends his life handling the dead and their secrets. Let me get that for you, he said, sliding the papers out and placing them in front of me. I didn't want to read more than I had to. It felt personal. It was Rick's handwriting that hit me first. His numbers were neat, his letters careful, the same slanted script that had written my birthday cards, grocery list, notes on the fridge. But this wasn't a grocery list. Derek BMW purchase, March 11th, paid in cash, claims year-end bonus, confirmed with firm, no bonuses issued this quarter. My brain snagged on the words, Derek, BMW cash. I thought of the shiny black car that had appeared in his driveway last month, the way he'd laughed when I commented on it. Big win on a case, Mom, he'd said, flipping his keys, perks of being good at what I do. My eyes dropped to the next line. Sienna, house in Willow Ridge, purchase price, approx $430,000, minimal mortgage, RN salary insufficient for standard down payment, source of funds unknown. I saw my daughter's bright, excited face the day she dragged me through that house, showing me the granite countertops and the soaking tub like a kid on Christmas morning. Can you believe I got approved for this, Mom? She'd said. Sometimes hard work pays off. Further down the page, March 25th, Derek asked detailed questions about my life insurance policy, wanted specifics on payout timelines. April 2nd, Sienna asked if I'd had any new health issues, suggested I see Dr. Hammonds just to be safe. April 14th, both children independently bring up will revisions, express concern about what happens to Mom if something happens to me. My mouth went dry. What is this? Keep reading, Harry said softly. The next page was worse. More dates, more observations, cash withdrawals, conversations overheard, Derek's frustration about how long it takes old people to die naturally, Sienna's comments about working with frail patients all the time and how easy it is for their systems to crash. I shook my head. No, he wouldn't. Rick wouldn't write this about them. He adored them. I believe he did, Harry said, which is why this must have been extraordinarily difficult for him. My eyes blurred. The words on the paper doubled, then swam. You're telling me my husband was investigating our children. The sentence felt obscene. I am telling you, he said carefully, that your husband was suspicious enough to document things, and to hide that documentation where no one in the family would casually stumble on it. I wanted to argue, to say Derek was a little controlling sometimes, sure, but he'd always been protective. To say Sienna could be overbearing with her medical advice, but her whole life revolved around caring for sick people. Instead, I just stared at the pages and felt a slow, sick dread unfurl in my stomach. If this feels like too much, I thought, imagining your faces as you listen. Trust me, it felt worse sitting in that chair. Harry cleared his throat. Mrs. Ellison, there's more. He picked up the device with gloved fingers. This is a digital voice recorder, he said, high-end, the kind private investigators often use. Your husband had it in the same sewn pocket. It was powered on when we found it. Rick doesn't. I stopped myself. Rick didn't have a recorder, I was going to say, but apparently Rick had a lot of things I didn't know about. Harry pressed the button. A tiny screen blinked to life. A list of files appeared, each with a time. He selected one near the top and set the recorder on the desk between us. Speaker facing up. Listen to this, he said quietly. The sound that came out was faint, filtered through the tiny speaker, but unmistakable. It was Derek's voice, telling you, we need to be more careful, he was saying, irritation threading through his words. The old man's getting suspicious. He's not as senile as Mom. I flinched. They were talking about us like we weren't real. Another voice, softer, sharper, slid in over his. Sienna. He's noticing because you're being sloppy, she said. You can't suddenly act interested in their finances after 40 years and expect him not to question it. I'm trying to get things in place before something happens, Derek snapped. Once he's gone, everything gets 10 times more complicated. There was a rustling sound, like someone shifting in a chair, which is why we talked about phase 2, Sienna replied. Her tone was the same one she used to explain medications to me. Calm, clinical, detached. A natural event is best. Heart attack, stroke, something appropriate to their age and history. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles ached. To their age and history, she repeated on the recording. You know how many heart attacks I see in my unit every month. No one questions it. When someone in their 60s with hypertension goes into arrest, it's sad, but expected. Can you guarantee that? Derek asked. As much as anything in medicine can be guaranteed, administer the right thing, in the right dose, at the right time, and their hearts will do the rest. Harry stopped the playback. The room was suddenly too quiet. The faint hum of the lights, the soft buzz of the refrigerator unit down the hall, my own harsh breathing, that was all. I sat there, listening to my heart pound in my ears, my legs gone oddly numb. If I stood up, I wasn't sure they'd hold me. That could be about patience, I said weakly. Sienna works with cardiac patients all the time. Maybe they're role-play, talking about cases. You know how she is. She brings work home. Even to my own ears, I sounded desperate. Harry didn't argue. He just pressed another button. A different file. Life insurance pays out, what, within 30 days? Derek's voice, again, more relaxed this time. Between that, the house, the retirement accounts, we're looking at what, close to 2 mil. Sienna made a thoughtful sound. Assuming the market doesn't tank. Yeah, the sooner the better. Honestly, property values are high right now. We sit on that house too long. We start losing money to taxes. So we move when everything's fresh, Derek said. No point dragging this out. Grief, process, sell the house, cash out, start over. And Mom? Sienna asked. A pause. Mom comes as a package deal, Derek said finally. She inherits everything first. Then we handle it. Handle it. The words rattled around in my skull like marbles. Mrs. Ellison, Harry said gently. I can turn this off. If not, my voice surprised me with its harshness. Play the rest, he obliged. More snippets. Derek joking about waiting for lightning to strike. Sienna mentioning knowing exactly how much potassium chloride it would take to push a compromised heart over the edge. Laughter. The clink of glasses. At some point, my vision narrowed. The edges of the room went fuzzy, like I was looking down a tunnel. A high, buzzing sound started in my ears. I realized belatedly it was my own pulse. "Breathe," Harry said, standing quickly. "Mrs. Ellison, you're hyperventilating. Put your head down." He guided me gently to lean forward, my forehead near my knees. My stomach rolled, the world tipped. Those were my children. Those were the babies I'd held, the teenagers I'd grounded, the adults I'd been so proud of, coolly discussing my death like it was just another line item in a spreadsheet. When I finally straightened, my face felt hot and my hands were iced. "There's one more thing," Harry said. I laughed then, a raw, humorless sound. "Of course there is." He removed another folded paper from the evidence bag. This one was thicker, worn at the creases like it had been opened and refolded many times before being hidden away. My name was on the front. "Maggie." In Rick's neat script, my throat closed. For a second I couldn't bring myself to touch it. "This was with the others," Harry said quietly. "I didn't read it. It's addressed to you." My fingers shook as I unfolded it. "Maggie, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me." I had to stop for a moment. Even his written voice sounded like him, calm/steady, trying to manage a crisis he didn't cause. "I know you're probably angry that I didn't tell you any of this sooner. I wanted to, God knows I wanted to, but I needed evidence first, and I needed to be sure before I put this burden on you. For the last several months, I've been looking into some disturbing inconsistencies in Derek and Sienna's financial situations. New cars, new houses, spending habits that don't match their reported income. At first, I thought I was imagining things, or being paranoid. He listed dates, withdrawals, odd transfers, things he'd checked and double-checked, the accountant in him refusing to let it go. The more I dug, the worse it got. I discovered cash deposits with no clear source, shell companies tied to Derek, and funds being funneled through accounts Sienna should have no access to. I confronted Derek once, casually, and his reaction confirmed my worst fear. He's in trouble with some very bad people. I felt the blood drain from my face. My eyes skated further down the page. I won't put all the details here in case this letter falls into the wrong hands, but I've learned enough to know that our children are involved in dangerous, criminal activity that puts us both at risk. Our children. The letters blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading. I started recording some of their conversations when I noticed them asking more and more questions about our health, my life insurance, and our will. "What you heard just now is likely only part of it. I've been working with Detective Lucas Carter at the state police for the last 3 months. He's been helping me document what Derek and Sienna are doing and how it links to a wider network. If anything happens to me, Maggie, you must contact him immediately. His direct number is written on the back of this letter. Please, and I cannot stress this enough, trust no one in the family except yourself. Not Derek, not Sienna, not their spouses, not anyone who might be influenced by them. They are not the people we thought we raised." A tear splashed onto the page, smearing the ink slightly. "I am so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept hoping they would stop before it got this far. But I can't ignore the reality anymore. I believe they are planning to kill us. I've taken as many precautions as I can to protect you. The recordings and documents I've gathered should be enough to put them away if something happens to me. But you have to be the one to act on it. I love you more than anything in this world, Maggie. You have been my partner, my friend, my anchor in every storm. If I fail to protect you, I need you to protect yourself. Live. Even if I'm not there, don't let what our children have become be the end of your story too. All my love." Ricky, don't know how long I stared at that last line. The words wavered in and out of focus as if I were underwater.
Behind me, the refrigerator unit in the prep room cycled on again. The sound suddenly had teeth. "Mrs. Ellison," Harry said gently, "given what you just heard on the recorder and what your husband wrote, I don't think we can safely assume his death was entirely natural." I looked up slowly. The doctors said heart attack, natural causes, no suffering. "Yes, ma'am." He watched me carefully. "But your daughter described, in very specific terms, how one might make a heart attack look natural in someone with your husband's age and history." Something in my chest cracked, not loudly, more like hairline fractures spreading in a piece of glass. "If they killed him," I whispered, the words tasting foreign and metallic, then I'm next." Harry didn't say it. He didn't have to. We both heard it hanging there. Your husband hid this in a place he knew we'd find it eventually, he said, which means he knew this might be the only way the truth reached you. I believe he wanted you to have a head start. My purse buzzed softly against my hip. For one insane second, I wondered if phones had started trembling in fear now too. I pulled it out with numb fingers. Derek, Mom, I'm coming over first thing in the morning. We need to go over some financial matters and make sure your future is secure. A week ago, that would have sounded like a loving, responsible son doing his duty. Now the word secure felt like a threat. I showed the screen to Harry with a hand that shook more than I wanted it to. He read it and pressed his lips together. I think, he said slowly, that you should not be alone with your son and daughter until you've spoken to Detective Carter. I folded Rick's letter carefully and slid it back into the evidence bag along with the notes. Harry placed the recorder inside as well and sealed the top. Can I? My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. Can I take these? They're yours, he said. Your husband clearly intended them for you. I'll keep copies of the existence of these items in my records in case anything happens, but the originals should go with you. I stood up on legs that felt like they'd been replaced with hollow pipes. As we walked back through the corridor, the funeral home felt even more unreal than before. The air was too clean, the silence too heavy. Somewhere in one of those rooms, my husband's body lay perfectly still while his voice on a tiny recorder detonated my life. If you're still watching, I thought, hand tightening around the bag, this is the moment you realize the story isn't about a widow grieving a natural loss. It's about a woman who just found out she's sleeping in a house with people who might be planning her murder. Harry walked me to the side entrance, pushing the door open and letting the cold night air rush in. Mrs. Ellison, he said quietly, I'm very sorry for all of this, if you need anything. I think I have enough anything for one night, I said, surprising both of us with the rough edge in my tone. He gave a small, sad nod. Be careful. Outside, the parking lot was almost painfully empty. My car sat alone under a streetlight, casting a long shadow across the cracked asphalt. I clutched the bag to my chest as if someone might step out of the darkness and snatch it away. The drive home was a blur of headlights and black pavement, and the echo of my children's voices in my head. The old man's getting suspicious. Heart attack, stroke, something believable for their age. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the horizon was blushing the faintest shade of gray. Dawn creeping up on a night that should never have existed. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I walked straight to the kitchen, turned on the overhead light, and emptied the evidence bag onto the table. Rick's notes, Rick's letter, the sleek, malevolent little recorder. I sat down in my chair, the one I'd used for 1,000 mundane breakfasts, and looked at the tools my husband had left behind to save my life. Okay, I whispered to him, to myself, to whatever audience had stuck around this long. Let's hear everything. And as the first birds began to sing outside the kitchen window, I picked up the recorder, pressed play, and braced myself to listen to my children plan my death. I lost track of how many times I hit play. At some point, the dark outside the kitchen window turned from black to charcoal to that washed-out pre-dawn gray, but I barely noticed. I just sat at the table with Rick's recorder between my hands, the little red light winking like it was judging me. If you've ever watched a true crime documentary at 3 a.m, imagine that. Then imagine the voices belong to your own children. That's where I was. The first few files were short. Snippets of arguments, muffled conversations in the hallway, Derek complaining about timelines, Sienna making jokes about geriatric patients in a tone that made my skin crawl now. Then I found one labeled with a date from 3 weeks before Rick died. Click. I'm telling you, once both of them are gone, it's clean, Derek said, sounding exactly like he did when he was walking a jury through closing arguments. Calm, confident. Life insurance is, what, 500? House is 6 minimum. Retirement accounts, Mom's inheritance from Grandma Jean were sitting on close to $2 million. He said it like he was doing basic math, not pricing our lives. Sienna's voice came next, casual, the way she'd talk on the phone while driving home from a shift. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. Property taxes, health issues, surprise hospital stays. It's like watching our money leak out through an IV. These are our parents, see, Derek said, but there was no warmth in it. We're not talking about strangers. At work, I watch people like them die every week, she said. Half of them barely know where they are. It's not evil to speed up what nature's already doing. I stopped the recording. My fingers were numb. I wrapped them around my coffee mug, desperate for something solid, and finally realized the coffee had gone cold hours ago. It tasted like metal when I swallowed. For a second, I thought about turning the recorder off, putting it in a drawer, and pretending I'd never heard any of it. But I'd stood in a funeral home office and read my husband's handwriting telling me our children were dangerous. I'd seen dates and bank transactions and the name of a state detective. You don't put that genie back in the bottle. I hit play again. New file, different day. Potassium chloride, Sienna was saying, in that firm, clinical tone she used to explain side effects to nervous families. Small dose, IV, you push it fast enough and the heart flips into arrhythmia. In someone Dad's age with his blood pressure history, it reads like a spontaneous cardiac event. Translate, Derek said, for the lawyers in the room. It makes his heart stop. She said, patient. On paper, it looks like a heart attack. The EKG, the labs, the age, the stress, no one questions it. They shrug and say, guess his ticker finally gave out. That still sounds risky, Derek replied. What if somebody pulls his chart, runs extra tests? Who? She snorted. His small-town primary doctor, some overworked ER doc. They see 62-year-old white male with hypertension dropped dead at his desk and move on. You know how many of those they see in a month. She laughed softly. He'll just be another one. My hand jerked, knocking the mug sideways. It hit the edge of the table, rolled, then crashed onto the tile. Cold coffee splattered my feet, ceramic shards skittered across the floor. I stared at the mess, breath sawing in and out of my chest, and for a second the whole room tilted. The image came back in full color. Rick in his office, slumped over his desk, glasses still on, coffee cold on the coaster. They hadn't just talked about it. They'd done it. My daughter, my nurse, the one who sent me pictures in her scrubs and told me she loved taking care of the old folks, had injected something into her father's veins and watched his heart stop. Something broke open in me then, not quietly, not politely. A sound came out of my throat that didn't sound like something a 64-year-old church widow was supposed to make. Grief hit first, hot, wild, clawing, it hurt to breathe. But riding in under it came something sharper. Fear, then beneath that, something colder. Fine, Maggie, I thought, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. You wanted the truth. Here it is. I picked up the recorder again. More conversations, more math. Sienna walking Derek through dosages, using words like titrate and symptom profile. Derek talking about property values, tax brackets, and maximizing the window after we were both gone. At some point, the sun finally dragged itself up, frosting the backyard in pale light. My wall clock read 7:18 a.m. On the table beside the recorder, Rick's letter sat where I'd left it. At the bottom, under his looping signature, he'd written a phone number and 3 words. Call Detective Carter. My finger hovered over the keypad for a heartbeat. Then I dialed. The line rang once. Carter, a man's voice said, rough, awake, no nonsense. Detective Lucas Carter. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. Speaking. My name is Margaret Ellison, I said. My husband was Richard Ellison. He wrote your name and number in a letter. He said you were helping him. Silence, long enough for my heart to stutter. Mrs. Ellison, he said finally, I'm very sorry about your husband. I was hoping I wouldn't have to hear from you like this. You knew, I asked. You knew that they might. I knew your husband was scared, he said. I knew he was digging into things your son and daughter didn't want him to see. We've been working together just under 3 months. That recorder, I said. The notes. He left all of it in his jacket and the funeral director found it. I've been listening all night. They talk about killing us like they're planning a vacation. I need you to listen to me very carefully, Carter said. His voice dropped into a tone I recognized from every crime show I'd ever watched. Calm but edged with urgency. You are now a witness in an active investigation and based on what your husband feared, a potential target. You cannot confront your children. You cannot let them know what you've heard. You understand? I understand, I said, though my stomach twisted. He said to trust you, that you were the only one in the family I should trust. That landed. I heard it in his exhale. He was a smart man, Carter said. Here! What we're going to do, we meet on neutral ground. Somewhere public out of the way. There's a diner off Route 17, the Cloverleaf. You know it. Of course, I said. Rick and I used to go there for pancakes on Sunday mornings when the kids were little. Can you be there in 45 minutes? He asked. Yes, I said. I'll bring the recorder, the notes, everything. Good, he said. Until you leave your house, keep your routine as normal as possible. And Mrs. Ellison. Yes. Don't take anything from them, he said. Pills, drinks, food, nothing, not until we talk. We hung up. My phone buzzed again before I could put it down. Derek. It figured. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I remembered Carter's warning to act normal. I answered. Hey, Mom, Derek said, sounding bright and cheerful in a way that made my skin crawl. Did I wake you? I've been up, I said. Yeah, I figured. I could hear the smile in his voice. Listen, Sienna and I were talking. We're actually pulling into your driveway now. Thought we'd get there early and go over some of Dad's financials while things are still straightforward. I slid down my spine. Yours here. I walked to the front window and peeked through the curtain. His black BMW was already in the driveway. Sienna's white SUV right behind it. Of course they were. You didn't have to do that, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. You could have called first. We wanted to surprise you, he said. You shouldn't have to deal with this stuff alone. If you're watching this, by the way, this is the moment where you start yelling at the screen. Don't open the door. Give me a minute to, get dressed, I said. I'll unlock the door. No rush, Derek said, and I heard his key in the lock. We've got keys. The line went dead. Panic hit, sharp and clean. The recorder, the notes, Rick's letter, all of it was still spread across my kitchen table like an indictment. I lunged for a reusable canvas grocery bag hanging off a chair and swept everything in with shaking hands. The bag bulged awkwardly. The front door opened. Mom, Sienna's voice floated down the hall. You up? Just a second, I called back, trying to sound frazzled and sleepy instead of like a woman hiding evidence from her own children. The basement door was 3 steps from the kitchen. I yanked it open and took the stairs faster than my knees have ever allowed. Rick's workshop in the corner still smelled like sawdust and oil. His old metal tool cabinet sat against the far wall, scuffed and solid. There was a narrow gap between it and the concrete wall, full of dust and lost screws. I shoved the bag into that space and kicked until it wedged tight, hidden behind the cabinet. Mom, Derek called, closer now. I'm coming, I yelled, breathless. By the time I came back upstairs, they were in the kitchen like they owned the place. Derek turned at the sound of my footsteps. He looked like the perfect grieving son, red-rimmed eyes, neat shirt, tie loosened just enough to say, I've been up all night with paperwork. Mom, you look terrible, he said, with just enough concern to make it sound like a compliment. Did you sleep at all? Some, I lied. Sienna leaned against the counter, arms folded, professional concern etched on her face. To anyone else, she'd look like the ideal nurse daughter. To me, after hours of hearing her talk about dosages and injections, she looked like someone wearing my daughter's skin. Have you been taking the medication I gave you? She asked, head tilted. You sounded a little out of it yesterday. The pills, I said. The little white ones, she said, smiling. For your nerves. Grief hits harder at your age. You need help regulating your sleep. I thought about the last one I'd almost swallowed, the chalky taste on my tongue before I'd spit it into a tissue and flushed it. Yes, I said, I've been taking them. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Regularly. More or less. She studied me for a beat too long, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Good, she said. We don't want you crashing on us. She moved to the coffee maker and started fussing with filters and grounds. The domestic rhythm would have comforted me any other week of my life. Now all I saw was her hands, steady and practiced. Let me make you some coffee, she said. You'll feel better with something warm in your system. That's not necessary. Mom, Derek cut in, snapping open his leather folder. We need you clear-headed. There's a lot to go through. Bank accounts, Dad's retirement, the mortgage, the will. I told you I'd handle everything, but there are signatures we'll need. He spread papers across the table like a magician laying out cards. Power of attorney forms, consent forms, things I would have signed a week ago without reading because I trusted him. My throat went dry. You don't have to worry about any of this, he said, giving me that steady, lawyerly smile. That's why you had kids, right? Built-in advocates. Behind him, Sienna reached into her purse. It was subtle. If I hadn't spent the night listening to her discuss poison, I might have missed it. A tiny glass vial appeared between her fingers, half shielded by her palm. She uncapped it with her thumb and tipped a clear liquid into one of the mugs she'd set aside. Her body blocked Derek's view. If I hadn't been watching for it, I might have missed that too. Mom, Derek's gaze flicked from my face to the floor, probably nodding the broken mug I'd half cleaned. You okay? Actually, I heard myself say, I just remembered. I have to be somewhere this morning. He frowned. Where? Appointment with the insurance company, I said, grabbing onto the lie like a lifeline. About your father's policy. They called yesterday. Something about signatures. Sienna stopped stirring the coffee for half a heartbeat. Mom, that doesn't make sense, Derek said. I already talked to the insurance carrier. There's nothing on their calendar. Are you sure you didn't dream it? There it was again, the quiet rewrite of reality, the suggestion that I was confused, misremembering. I wrote it down, I said, on the pad by the phone. There was nothing there when we came in, Sienna said. Maybe you threw it away. You've been a little scattered. I smiled. It felt wrong on my face. Well, then I'll call them from the car and confirm, I said. Either way, I'm going. I picked up my purse. Mom, Derek stepped between me and the doorway. His hand closed around my arm, gentle but unyielding. It startled me how strong his grip was. He'd been a scrawny little kid who couldn't open pickle jars. Now his fingers dug into my skin hard enough to bruise. You're not thinking straight, he said softly, leaning in. You haven't slept, you're grieving, and now you're telling us about imaginary appointments. This is exactly what Sienna and I were worried about. My heart pounded so hard it made me lightheaded, but my voice somehow stayed steady. I am your mother, I said. I have been driving myself to appointments since before you were in kindergarten. If I want to go sit in a waiting room and argue with an insurance rep, I will. We're just trying to protect you, Derek said. Legally, financially, you don't understand how complicated some of this is. Mom, you could sign something you regret. That's funny, I said, and saw surprise flicker across his face. Because last I checked, it was my name on the deeds and the accounts. The air in the room cooled. Sienna's smile thinned. Derek's hand tightened fractionally. If you're wondering, when the horror movie music should swell, it's here. Look, he said, I don't want to argue, but we drove all the way over here. Sienna's been up all night after a double shift. The least you can do is sit down and have a cup of coffee while we go over the basics. He nodded toward the mug Sienna had prepared, the one with the invisible dose in it. My stomach twisted. If I drink that coffee, I thought, I might not make it to Route 17. I pulled my arm free with a sharp twist. Years of lugging laundry baskets and grocery bags paid off. "No," I said simply. "I'm going." The word hung there between us. Sienna's eyes darkened. Derek's jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw it clearly, the anger underneath the concern, the entitlement. "I love you both," I said, because that part was still horribly, stupidly true. "But I am not a child. I'm going to this appointment. You can sit here and drink the coffee yourself if you want." I walked past them. My hand shook on the doorknob, but I made myself open it calmly. Step out calmly. Close it calmly. Only when I was in the car, doors locked, engine started, did I let myself exhale. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the doorway side by side, watching me. Not waving, not smiling. Strategizing. For the first time in my life, I saw my children not as the people who would hold my hand in the hospital one day, but as people calculating how soon they could cash the check. I backed out of the driveway and headed toward Route 17, feeling their eyes on me until I turned the corner. The Cloverleaf Diner appeared 20 minutes later like something out of a different life. Faded sign, chipped paint, the neon coffee cup blinking weakly against the morning light. I parked, hands still trembling on the wheel, and stared at the entrance. This was it, the line Rick had drawn in his neat, accountant handwriting. The man he'd trusted when he couldn't trust his own children. Inside, through the smudged windows, I saw a man in his 50s sitting in a corner booth with a clear view of the parking lot. Gray hair, navy jacket, posture relaxed but alert. He looked up when the bell over the door chimed. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, standing. I nodded. "Call me Maggie," I managed. He held out his hand. His grip was firm, solid, grounding. "Then you can call me Luke," he said. "Let's talk about how we keep you alive." I slid into the booth across from him. Heart still racing, the ghosts of Derek and Sienna's eyes lingering in my mind. For the first time since Rick died, I wasn't just a widow drowning in casseroles and condolences. I was a witness. And I was finally sitting with someone who didn't want me dead. Luke Carter watched me the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, not unkind, but with no illusions. Up close, he looked like every cop you've ever seen in a serious documentary. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, lines bracketing his mouth that didn't come from laughing. Button-down shirt, plain navy jacket, hands wrapped around a chipped white coffee mug like it was an old habit. But when I slid into the booth, he stood up, let me sit first, didn't pat my hand, didn't tilt his head and ask, "How are you holding up?" like every other person had. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, my voice still shaky. "Thank you for calling," he replied. "Most people in your position spend months telling themselves it's a misunderstanding." His eyes searched my face, not hunting for weakness, but for how much truth I was ready to hear. "You listened to the recordings?" he asked. "All night," I said. "I heard enough to know my kids were planning to kill us, and that they already killed Rick." He nodded once, like that matched what he already knew, or feared. "Okay, Maggie," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Here's my promise. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to talk to you like you're fragile. I'm going to tell you exactly what we know, and then we're going to decide how to keep you alive. Fair." "That's all I want," I said. "Someone to treat me like I have a brain." A corner of his mouth twitched. "Good, then let's talk about Derek and Sienna." He pulled a thin, battered folder from his bag and laid it on the table between us. Inside were printouts and photos, paper clipped in neat stacks. "Your husband came to us 3 months ago," Luke said. "He'd noticed things that didn't add up, big purchases, strange withdrawals, conversations he overheard. We started small, just background checks, financial pulls, then it escalated." He slid a page toward me. Even upside down, I recognized my son's photo from his law firm website. Same perfect tie knot, same too-white smile. "Derek's firm does a lot of small criminal defense," Luke said. "Low-level drug cases, DUIs, probation violations. Somewhere along the line, he decided it was more profitable to work for some of his clients off the books." I swallowed. What does that mean? It means he launders money for a drug operation, Luke said, as calmly as if he were telling me it might rain later. Moves cash through shell companies, fake consulting fees, bogus settlements. Takes a cut, skims a bit. He tapped another page, rows of numbers highlighted. The problem, he went on, is that your son isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He started skimming too much. Started treating client funds like his personal ATM. As of last month, he owed some very dangerous people just under $200,000. $200,000. The number sat in the air like a weight. I thought of the black BMW in my driveway, gleaming in the sun, the fancy suits, the expensive watch I'd noticed at Christmas and told him looked a little much. Rick wrote that down, I murmured. He wrote that Derek paid cash for the car, said he checked with the firm and there were no bonuses. Luke nodded. Rick had a good instinct for numbers. He was right. That BMW, the club memberships, some of the travel, none of it fits with an $80,000 a year legitimate income. Not unless you've got a second job. Derek's second job happens to be criminal. My stomach rolled. And Sienna, I asked quietly. If Derek being crooked money-wise was a punch, I already knew what was coming with her. I'd heard enough overnight to dread it. Luke flipped to another section of the file. A hospital badge photo. My daughter in her scrubs, smiling into the camera. Sienna works at Fairview Medical Center, he said. Geriatric unit. Lots of elderly patients, lots of meds, lots of access. I know, I whispered. She loves her job. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second. Then he shook his head. She loves what her job lets her do, he said. For the last 3 years, she's been stealing and reselling prescription drugs. Opiates, benzos, high-value injectables. She falsifies inventory logs, alters charts, and blames the losses on clerical errors. He slid another page over, dates and medication names. Your husband tracked unusual death patterns in her unit. We cross-checked. We found medical records that had been edited after the fact. Dosage changes. Typos. Families who suddenly decided to donate estates to certain charities after their relatives died. I stared at the list until the words blurred. She's killing them, I said, not just Dad. We have strong evidence she's deliberately overdosed or accelerated decline in multiple elderly patients, Luke said. In each case, there's a financial benefit that traces back to entities your son controls. Shell charities, fake foundations, real estate holding companies. He sat back, letting it land. The short version, he added. Your kid's built a little ecosystem. He launders money, she feeds it with drugs and stolen assets. They fund their lives off the backs of people who trust them. And when the numbers didn't work, I whispered, they decided we were the solution. He didn't argue. I thought of Derek's house with its new kitchen, Sienna's photos in front of that brick 3-bedroom in Maple Heights she'd bought, because rent is just throwing money away. The designer coat she wore to the funeral, the one I'd told her was too much for this town. How does this tie into Rick's life insurance? I asked, forcing myself to ask the ugliest question. Luke folded his hands on the table. Your husband carried a $500,000 policy, he said. You have the house, savings, retirement, your mother's inheritance. Combined, we estimate your estate at around 1.8 to 2 million. The same number I'd heard in Sienna's cool voice at 3 a.m. They weren't just greedy, Luke continued. They're in debt to people who don't send polite letters. They're looking at broken bones, disappearances, shallow graves. That life insurance payout, that was their lifeline. Killing Rick and then you wasn't just about cashing out early. It was about staying alive. The diner hummed quietly around us. Waitresses refilled coffee for truckers and retirees. Somewhere a baby cried. It was all so normal that the words felt like they were coming from another universe. I reached into my purse with clumsy fingers and pulled out my phone. There's something else, I said. Last night, Derek texted, said he was coming over this morning to handle financial matters and secure my future. And this morning, I told him about the coffee, the vial, The way Derek's hand had tightened on my arm when I tried to leave. Luke listened without interrupting, jaw tightening only once, when I described the clear liquid tipping into my mug. When I finished, he didn't waste time pretending it might be innocent. "You are in immediate danger," he said flatly. "You cannot go back to that house alone. We're past the point of speculation." I felt something inside me sag, like a rope finally snapping. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Witness protection, do I disappear?" "Not formally, not yet," he said. "But we can put you under what we call informal protective custody. Controlled locations, limited contact, shadows on you at all times." He drained his coffee, set the mug aside. "Do you have family out of town?" he asked. "Someone you trust? No shared finances, no shared property, no way for Derek and Sienna to manipulate them." "My sister," I said automatically. Janet Brooks. She lives in Columbus." "Does your son or daughter have any leverage over her? Money, secrets, power of attorney?" "God, no," I said. "Janet barely tolerates them. She thinks Derek's a show-off and calls Sienna a little too polished." "That's a point in our favor," he said. "We get you to Janet's. I'll arrange for a team to go to your house with a warrant and collect the evidence you hid in the basement. The recorder, the notes. We lock that up somewhere your kids can't touch." He said it like a plan he'd already run in his head 3 times. "You'll drive me?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "You don't go anywhere alone until we have them in custody. You call Janet from my phone, not yours. You say you're coming for a visit. You don't tell her why yet." I nodded, dizzy. "Okay." We slid out of the booth. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Just before we reached the door, my phone vibrated in my hand. "Derek." Luke saw the name flash on the screen. "You should answer," he said quietly. "Put it on speaker. Let me hear act normal." "Normal, right." I swiped. "Hi's, honey." "Mom," Derek said. He sounded breathless, angry. "Where are you?" "We talked about this," I said, trying to keep my tone airy. "I told you I had an appointment." "You left the house," he said. "We came back to check on you and your car was gone. Sienna's worried." "You don't have to check on me every 5 minutes, Derek," I said, stepping out into the parking lot. Luke opened the passenger door of his unmarked sedan and gestured for me to get in. I slid into the seat and left the door slightly ajar so he could hear. "This morning was a lot," I went on. "I needed to clear my head." "Where are you?" he asked again, slower this time. "I'm driving to Columbus," I lied. "To stay with Janet for a few days, I need a change of scenery." On the other end of the line, I heard his breath catch. "Aunt Janet," he said. "Mom, that's a 2-hour drive. You hate driving on the interstate alone. Let us take you." Luke started the engine. The hum of the car filled the silence. "I'll be fine," I said. "I'm not helpless." "This isn't about helpless," Derek snapped, the mask slipping. "This is about your judgment. You're grieving. You've barely slept. You're calling imaginary insurance appointments and running off without telling anyone. Sienna thinks you might be having some kind of episode." "An episode," I repeated. "Is that the clinical term you two have picked out?" "I'm serious, Mom," he said. "We've already talked to Dr. Henson about getting you evaluated. If you start making impulsive decisions, the court can appoint someone to help manage things until you're more stable." "Power of attorney," I said softly. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "I have to go, Derek. I'll call you when I get to Janet." "Mom, don't hang up." I ended the call. Luke pulled out of the parking lot. "You heard that?" I asked. "Every word," he said. "They're laying groundwork to have you declared incompetent. That fits with what your husband found." I frowned. What he found? Luke checked his mirrors automatically as we turned onto the main road. "Rick pulled property records for your house," he said. "Then he went looking for any associated filings. 3 days before he died, someone recorded a durable power of attorney nomming Derek as your agent. Signature looks like yours, notarized by one of his colleagues." My stomach dropped through the floor. "I never signed anything like that," I whispered. I know, Luke said. Rick knew too. He printed the filing, highlighted the inconsistencies. That's in the evidence you hid. He also found something else. He reached down, tapped the folder on the console between us. The house on Maple Street, he said. Your house, it's already listed for sale. It hit the market 2 days before Rick's heart gave out. Your husband found the online listing and brought it to me. He was pretty shaken. For sale, my voice cracked. Our house is for sale. It was listed through a friend of Derek, Luke said. Quietly, no sign in the yard yet, online only, photos from an old appraisal, description about motivated sellers looking to relocate quickly. I pictured the place where I'd cooked dinners and hosted birthday parties, where I'd painted nursery walls and patched drywall after Derek put a baseball through it, sitting on a real estate website like just another asset to be flipped. So they were planning to kill us, I said, and then list the house as if we'd just decided to downsize. Luke didn't answer. He didn't have to. We reached the stoplight at the edge of town. As he turned left, I glanced in the side mirror. My heart slammed against my ribs. Luke, I whispered, he's here. A black BMW had just swung into the diner's parking lot. It paused, as if the driver was scanning the entrance, then jerked back into the street, accelerating in our direction. Luke's jaw tightened. Buckle up, he said, and whatever happens, don't turn around. Let me worry about him. He took the next right instead of going straight onto the highway. Residential streets blurred past. Lawns, mailboxes, patches of patchy grass. In the mirror on my side, the BMW appeared, a dark shark cutting through the traffic. Closer, faster, not the way Derek drove when he ferried his kids to piano lessons. He's tailing us, I said. I see him, Luke replied. His voice had gone flat and focused. He probably threw your phone into a tracker app the second you hung up. He knows you called someone, went somewhere. He doesn't know who you're with. We took another turn, this time onto a 2-lane road lined with bare trees. The BMW followed, closing the gap. I could see Derek's face now, tight with fury, one hand white-knuckled on the wheel. Is he trying to run us off the road? I asked. He's trying to keep eyes on you, Luke said. Maybe box us in, force us to stop somewhere he controls. The road opened into a stretch of fields. No houses, no witnesses. The BMW surged ahead, swung out like Derek was considering cutting around us. Luke accelerated smoothly, keeping distance. He didn't jerk the wheel or curse. His calm made the whole thing somehow more terrifying. Can you call for help? I asked. I already did, he said, tapping his earpiece. Units are moving to intercept, but we're ahead of them. Best thing we can do is get off predictable routes. He veered left onto a narrow county road I barely recognized, a ribbon of cracked asphalt winding between stands of trees. Behind us, the BMW hesitated, then followed. Derek had always been a cautious driver, the kind of kid who'd refuse to back out of the driveway until everyone had their seatbelts on. The person behind us now was riding our bumper, hunting. Mom, I heard his voice in my head from when he was 8, lip trembling after he'd scraped his knee. I'd never let anything hurt you. I pressed my hands together in my lap to stop them shaking. The road curved sharply. Luke took the turn like he'd been driving it for 20 years. The BMW fishtailed for a moment, its tires squealing, then corrected. He's not going to give up, I said. No, Luke agreed quietly. He doesn't think he can afford to. He killed the headlights for half a second as we crested a small hill, then flicked them back on. The landscape opened up, showing another turn ahead, a gravel lane veering off to the right, half hidden by overgrown brush. Hold on, he said. At the last possible moment, he braked, swung us onto the gravel lane, and killed the lights again. We bumped along the rutted path for 20 yards, then rolled to a stop behind a stand of tall pines. Heart thudding in my ears, I stared straight ahead. The BMW shot, passed on the main, rode a beat later. Headlights flaring through the trees, engine roaring. Derek didn't slow, didn't look down our little side road. just kept chasing an empty stretch of asphalt. We sat in silence until the sound faded. "I'm going to give it another minute," Luke said. "Then we'll circle back using a different route. I've got patrol cars moving to pick him up if he heads back toward town." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My whole body shook. Some detached part of me noticed that my hands smelled like diner coffee and Rick's aftershave. "My own son," I whispered. "My own son just chased me down a country road like I was prey." Luke didn't offer sympathy. Somehow, that made it easier to keep talking. "Rick saw this coming, didn't he?" I said. "He saw enough," Luke replied. "He noticed the financial discrepancies first, then the forged power of attorney, then the listing." "How did he react?" I asked, "when he saw the house?" Luke's gaze softened just a little. "He brought me a printed copy of the online listing," he said. "They'd used your living room photos from an old refinancing appraisal. Same couch, same curtains. There was a line about the cozy family room where generations have made memories." That upset him. A broken laugh escaped me. "They turned my home into a sales pitch before they even buried him." "He told me," Luke went on, "that seeing that listing was the moment he knew. Up until then, he was hoping maybe he'd misread the bank statements. That there be some explanation. But putting your house on the market behind your back," he shook his head. "He knew then they were planning to move fast. As soon as both of you were gone, they'd cash out and disappear." "Disappear where?" I asked. "We'll get to that," he said. "Right now, our priority is getting you to Janet, without Derek playing demolition derby again." He started the car. Gravel crunched under the tires as we eased back toward the road, taking a different direction this time, away from the path Derek had taken. I turned to look out the side window. Fields, houses in the distance. A school bus lumbering along a far road, tiny kids waiting with their backpacks. 3 days ago, I'd been one of those women in a warm kitchen, packing lunches, checking my phone for text messages from my kids, believing they were my safety net. Now I was in the passenger seat of an unmarked police car, driving away from everything I'd built, because those same children saw me as a problem to be solved. Not just betrayal, I realized. Not just greed. This was a system, a machine they'd built piece by piece, patient and precise, feeding on vulnerable people for money. Rick had stuck his hand in the gears to stop it and paid with his life. And somewhere along the line, they decided that erasing us was just another cost of doing business. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and watched my town slide past, smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. Whatever illusion I'd been clinging to about good kids who made bad choices snapped clean in two. They weren't just lost. They were predators. And I was done pretending otherwise. By the time we reached Columbus, my body felt like it was made of someone else's bones. Janet's subdivision was the kind of quiet, middle-class neighborhood realtors describe as family-friendly. Neatly trimmed lawns. Kids, bikes abandoned in driveways. A plastic flamingo in one yard wearing a faded Buckeyes hat. Carter parked down the block first, just watching. His eyes tracked the street, the corners, the parked cars, cataloging everything. "That our place?" he asked. I nodded. Blue shutters, hanging fern on the porch she keeps killing and replacing. "Stay put," he said. He got out first, walked the sidewalk like he was out for a casual stroll, then veered onto Janet's porch. I watched him ring the bell, badge already in hand. Janet yanked the door open halfway through the second ring. I recognized the outline of her body language even from the car. Braced spine, crossed arms, face in full, "you'd better have a good reason" mode. He held up his badge. She deflated a little, then craned her neck to look past him. When she spotted me in the passenger seat, her hand flew to her mouth. A second later, she was running. I barely had the door open before she wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like laundry detergent and coffee, and the cheap vanilla body spray she'd worn since high school. "What happened?" she whispered into my hair. "Mags, what on earth?" "Inside," Carter said gently. "Let me clear the house first, then you can yell at me." Janet shot him a glare. "I don't yell," she said. "I strongly express myself." "Uh-huh," he replied, already moving. He swept through every room like he'd done it 1,000 times. Bedroom, guest room, kitchen, garage. Checked doors, windows, backyard. He even popped his head into the attic. When he came back down, he nodded. "We're good for now. No signs anyone's been in or watching. But from this point on, curtains stay shut. You don't open the door unless it's me or someone I've told you about." Janet folded her arms again. "You want to tell me why my sister looks like she hasn't slept in a week, and you're talking about surveillance like this is a spy movie." I felt something sharp in my throat. "Jan," I said, voice thin, "Rick's dead, and Derek and Sienna, they're not who we thought." Her face crumpled. "Oh, honey, I heard about Rick. I was going to drive up this weekend, I swear, but what do you mean they're not who we thought?" Carter set his bag on the dining table, giving me a look that said, "Your call." "Short version," I said. "They've been doing very bad things to very vulnerable people, and now they're trying to kill me too." Janet stared at me for a long second. Then she exhaled. "Okay," she said. "You can give me the long version after I make 3 gallons of coffee. You," she jabbed a finger at Carter, "can tell me what I have to do to keep her alive." "Deal," he said. For 10 miraculous minutes, it was almost normal. Janet fussed with mugs and creamers and the good sugar, muttering about how I'd driven all this way without telling her. Carter murmured into his phone in low tones, using phrases like "secondary location is secure" and "requesting mobile lab." I sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I didn't drink from, listening to the clock tick. If you're watching this kind of story on a screen, this is the part where you think the danger has taken a breath. The safe house, the sister, the moment to regroup. It lasted exactly 11 minutes and 32 seconds. My phone rang. Sienna's name lit up the screen. Janet glanced over my shoulder. "Are you going to answer that?" Carter's head snapped up. "Put it on speaker," he said quietly. "Let me listen." My thumb hovered for a second, then I hit accept. "Hey, honey," I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. "Mom," Sienna's voice came through bright and anxious. "Where are you? Derek said you took off without telling anyone. We went back to the house and you were gone." "I needed some space," I said. "I told Derek I'm at Janet's for a few days." "You drove all the way to Columbus," she said, a little breathless laugh in her tone. "By yourself? Mom, that's not safe. You've barely slept since Dad died. You shouldn't be on the road." "I'm here," I said, in one piece. A pause. I could picture her in her kitchen, phone tucked under her chin, eyes narrowed, calculating. "Okay," she said. "Well, we were going through Dad's office, trying to get everything organized for you like we promised, and we found some disturbing notes." Across the table, Carter scribbled something in his notebook. "What kind of notes?" I asked. "He was writing down strange stuff about us," she said. "About you, paranoid things, like he thought someone was trying to hurt him. He had lists, Mom, lists of medications, little comments about us. It's honestly, I think he was losing it before the heart attack." "Gaslighting, straight from the textbook." "He was under a lot of stress," she went on smoothly. "Between work and his health and worrying about you, Dr. Turner said cognitive decline can present that way in older men." Dr. Michael Turner, Rick's primary care physician, the one who'd signed off on heart disease, natural causes, while my husband's body cooled on the gurney. "I know why he was writing things down," I said. "He was tracking what you and Derek were doing." The line went very quiet. When Sienna spoke again, the warmth was gone. Her tone flattened into something clinical and cold, the voice she probably used when she talked about patients, not to them. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "Dad was working with the state police," I said. "With Detective Carter, he knew about Derek's clients, about your charities, about the drugs, about the forged power of attorney. He knew you were killing people." Janet's head snapped toward me. Carter didn't move, just watched my face. On the phone, there was a long exhale. "So," Sienna said softly, "he told you." He told me enough, I replied, and I heard the rest myself. Another small pause. I could almost hear her rearranging her strategy. Okay, she said, then I'll be honest too. A shiver ran through me. Mom, I don't know what Carter told you, but we found some of Dad's lab work in his online chart when we were at the house, she continued. You know Dr. Turner ran blood tests a few months back when Dad complained of fatigue. I remember, I said. I remembered sitting in the waiting room while Rick joked about getting old. There were irregularities, she said, markers that suggested he'd been given something that could have contributed to his heart attack. Dr. Turner was going to call you about it. He thinks someone might have been doozing him. Ice flooded my veins. Doozing him with what? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Hard to say without more tests, she replied in that detached, professional tone. But certain patterns show up with potassium chloride. Over time, in small doses, it can mimic heart disease, make a heart event look natural, especially in someone with high blood pressure. I gripped the edge of the table, so hard my fingers ached. And here's the thing, Mom, she added. If someone was slowly poisoning Dad that way, those same irregularities would show up in anyone else being dosed the same way. A spouse, for example. Someone who trusted the person giving them their medication. Janet's hand flew to her chest. Carter's pen stopped moving. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying, Sienna replied calmly, that you should come home, before people like Carter fill your head with nonsense and make things worse for you. We're your family. We can fix this. But if you run around making accusations, people are going to start wondering about your mental status, about whether you're competent to make decisions, about whether you're safe alone. She let that sit there heavy. Think about it, she said finally, and maybe think about getting your blood work checked, just in case. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone like it might bite me. Janet found her voice first. Did she just threaten you with your own blood? Carter pushed his chair back, already dialing. That wasn't just a threat, he said. That was a confession disguised as concern. He stepped into the living room, speaking low and fast to someone on the other end. I heard phrases drift back. Emergency exhumation, court order, full tox panel, Turner's records. Janet slid into the chair beside me, grabbed my hand. Maggie, she whispered, what is happening? Everything, I said, all at once. Time folded after that. I don't know how many hours passed, only that the light in Janet's kitchen changed from gray morning to harsh midday to the softer gold of late afternoon. Carter came and went, fielding calls, talking to people I couldn't see. At some point, a dark van with a state emblem pulled up 2 houses down. A woman in a windbreaker and latex gloves came in with a rolling case. This is Powell from the mobile lab, Carter said. We're going to draw some blood, Maggie. For what? Janet demanded. To see if your sister's daughter has been slowly poisoning her, Powell said matter-of-factly, snapping on a glove. Left arm, please. I held out my arm without arguing. The needle pinch barely registered. I watched the vial fill with dark red, my own body suddenly a piece of evidence. While Powell labeled the tube, Carter sat across from me with a different kind of heaviness in his eyes. They dug him up, I said before he could start. Didn't they? He didn't pretend to misunderstand. The judge signed the order faster than I expected, he said. Given the recordings and what you just told us from that call, we couldn't wait. I pictured Rick's coffin, the polished wood we'd picked out in a haze, being hoisted back into the open air. The ground torn open, strangers lifting him out. Don't dress it up, I said. Just tell me. Carter exhaled slowly. The preliminary tox report just came in, he said. They'll need more time to run everything, but they've already found abnormal levels of potassium and other markers in his tissues. The pattern is consistent with months of low-dose potassium chloride administration. Months, I echoed. 6 at least, he said. Maybe more. His heart didn't just give out last week, Maggie. It was being worn down on purpose, piece by piece, until one last push finished the job. Janet made a small, broken noise. She dropped into the chair beside me, both hands over her mouth. I stared at the grain of her kitchen table, trying to breathe around the pressure in my chest. He knew, I said. On some level, he knew. That's why he started writing everything down, why he called you. He suspected, Carter said. He didn't want to believe it, but he was an accountant. Numbers out of place made him itchy. He was joking, I whispered. About the fatigue, about getting old. He'd say, guess my ticker's just not what it used to be, Mags. And all that time. All that time, his daughter was measuring out death in invisible doses. Rage surged up through the grief, hot and wild. I bragged about her, I said. You know that, to everyone. My daughter the nurse, my son the lawyer. I wore their professions like they were my medals. Janet squeezed my arm so hard it hurt. You didn't do this, she said fiercely. They did. Carter cleared his throat. You remember earlier when I said Rick found patterns at the hospital? He asked. We've dug deeper since then. I think you need to know the full scope now. I wasn't sure I could take any more, but I nodded. He opened his folder again, this time with Officer Lauren Price leaning over his shoulder. She was in her early 30s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a practical knot. Sienna's unit sees a lot of high-risk patients, Lauren said. Elderly, multiple conditions, end-of-life cases. Death isn't unusual there. That's what she's been hiding behind. She turned a page so I could see. Names, ages, dates. We cross-referenced death certificates, medication logs, and financial records, she continued. We found at least 17 patients whose deaths were flagged as expected decline or cardiac event, where their medication charts were altered within 72 hours of death. Altered how? Janet asked, voice tight. Dosage changes, drug substitutions, undocumented administrations, Lauren said. In more than half of those cases, those patients had no immediate family, or their family members were elderly themselves. Within weeks of the deaths, their estates were donated to charities. She slid another page over. Logos, names, Foundation for Senior Wellness, Silver Horizons Fund, Community Support Initiative. Every single one of them, tied back to shell companies Derek controlled. They killed them, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Then stole their money over and over. And it wasn't just patients, Carter added. Derek's been running an identity theft ring on the side. He targets financially vulnerable clients, people behind on mortgages, small business owners in trouble. He offers solutions, then uses their data to open credit lines, fake loans, and real estate transactions. Money goes out through one of the shells, comes back clean on the other end. He flipped to a photo of a modest house with a foreclosure sign. This couple lost everything, he said. They thought your son was saving them. Instead, he sold their information to people who drained what little they had left. That's years, I said numbly. Years of this. 3 that we can prove easily, Lauren said. Likely more, we're still digging. Your husband's notes gave us a starting map. The recorder filled in a lot of the missing edges. I thought of Rick in his little office, hunched over his desk, listening to his own children talk about us like liabilities. And all the while, I whispered, I was telling people how proud I was of them. Because that's what parents do, Carter said quietly. You loved the version of them you thought existed. The people they chose to be when you weren't looking, that's on them. He leaned forward, his gaze steady. They are going to prison for a very long time, Maggie, he said. But before that happens, they are going to be desperate. They know what we have now. The recordings, the financials, the medical anomalies, the autopsy. They're not just looking at fraud charges anymore. They're looking at multiple counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, racketeering. He let the words sink in. People facing that kind of time sometimes convince themselves that one more crime will fix it, he finished. That if they can just clean up one more loose end, they can outrun the avalanche. Loose end, I repeated. That's what I am to them. He didn't contradict me. Across the room, Powell tucked my labeled blood vial into a portable cooler. When will we know, I asked her, about me? We're rushing it, she said. We'll run a full talk screen, look for the same patterns we saw in your husband. It'll still be hours before we have anything conclusive, maybe overnight. I nodded, then immediately regretted the movement. The room tilted just a little. But listen, she added. Even if we find nothing, I want you to think very carefully about every pill that passed your lips in the last 6 months. Every time your daughter insisted she'd already talked to your doctor and knew what was best. I didn't need to think. The scenes replayed themselves without my permission. Sienna at my kitchen table, shaking 2 small white pills into her palm. Mom, you're not yourself, just take these. They'll help you sleep. Sienna at the funeral home, pressing a bottle into my hand. You're shaking. This isn't healthy. Let me help you. Sienna at my sink, rinsing mugs. You don't need to read the labels. I do this for a living, remember. Had I swallowed one? Half. Had I chased it with water, trusting her the way I'd trusted her when she was 6, and told me she'd brushed her teeth without being told? Janet's chair scraped back. I'm going to lock up the medicine cabinet, she said. And the cleaning supplies. Hell, I'll lock up the vitamins. If anyone gives you so much as a tic-tac, it goes through Lauren first. Lauren gave a faint, grim smile. That's not a bad idea. It should have been funny. It was. Carter stood. We're going to rotate officers outside, he said. Unmarked cars. We'll keep a low profile so we don't turn the whole block into a circus, but you are not to leave this house without one of us. You do not answer the door. You let Janet and us handle the outside world. What about work? Janet asked. My boss. Your boss can survive without you for a few days, he said. You've been drafted. She opened her mouth to argue, then shut it again, eyes flicking to me. Fine, she said. But if anyone breaks in here, I'm hitting them with the cast iron skillet first and asking questions later. Noted, Lauren said. As the sun started to sink, the house felt smaller. Shadows stretched across the living room. The murmur of distant traffic filtered through the closed curtains. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I stood at Janet's front window, peeking through a narrow gap in the blinds. 2 cars were parked a few houses down now, nondescript sedans with people sitting motionless inside. To anyone else, they looked like neighbors. I knew better. They'll come, I said quietly. Carter joined me at the window. Probably, he said, in some form. They don't have anywhere else to go, I went on. Everything is collapsing around them. The money, their jobs, their image, the criminals they owe, the law they broke. And that, he said, makes them dangerous in a way they weren't before. Cornered animals bite harder. I rested my forehead lightly against the cool glass. When they were kids, I said, I used to lie awake worrying about what if something happened to them. A car accident, a stranger, a disease. It never once occurred to me to be afraid of them. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. Porch bulbs glowed warm over tidy steps. From somewhere nearby came the faint sound of a TV laugh track. Inside, my phone sat on Janet's table like a snake. I'd blocked Derek's number after his last call. Sienna's hovered at the edge of my screen, waiting. They wouldn't disappear quietly. They wouldn't confess and surrender. They would twist, manipulate, threaten, and bargain. They would use every weakness they knew I had because they'd helped shape them. The question was no longer, did my children try to kill me? The autopsy, the lab work, the recordings answered that. The new question was uglier and sharper. Now that I'd slipped out of their hands, how far would they go to get me back within reach? I let the blinds fall shut and stepped away from the window. The outline of the streetlight still burned into my vision. Somewhere out there, Derek and Sienna were recalculating. And for the first time in my life, I understood this simple, brutal truth. If I wanted to live, I had to stop thinking of them as my children and start thinking of them as what they'd chosen to be. Predators who had lost their favorite prey. The phone started ringing before the sun even finished going down. I was in Janet's living room, sitting on the couch with a blanket over my legs like an old woman in a commercial for arthritis meds, pretending to watch the news without actually seeing it. Outside, The unmarked cars idled quietly at the curb. Inside, the house hummed with a tense sort of stillness. My cell buzzed on the coffee table. Derek. Carter, who'd been standing by the front window, turned at the sound. His eyes met mine. "Speaker," he said. My fingers felt clumsy as I picked up the phone, swiped to answer, and set it on the table between us. "Mom," Derek said, voice warm, almost relieved. "Finally, you've been ignoring my calls." "Yes," I said, "I have." He chuckled softly, like I'd just made a cute joke. "We've been worried. You just disappear, and suddenly there are cops everywhere, and Sienna says you're talking crazy. Where are you?" "You know where I am," I said. "You always know, don't you?" A small pause, then lightly, "Sure. We've always kept tabs on you. You're our mother. It's our job to protect you." Carter's jaw clenched. Derek's voice shifted just a little. "But since we're being honest, yes, we know you're at Aunt Janet." My stomach tightened. "How?" I asked. "You use the same pharmacy app for refills, Mom," he said, amused. "It geotags your pickups, and your car has GPS they're very happy to share with law enforcement and certain attorneys who know how to ask." Of course, we trusted convenience more than privacy, another little brick in the wall we'd built for them. "Derek," I said, "just say what you called to say." The warmth drained out of his tone. "All right," he said. "Here it is, you need to come outside." Carter leaned forward, eyes fixed on the phone. "Why?" I asked. "Because we're parked on your street," Derek said calmly. "And we've planted something that can make this whole mess go away in one clean move." The words sat there for a heartbeat before my brain processed them. "What did you do?" I whispered. "A bomb, Mom," he said. "Not some Hollywood thing with blinking lights. Simple, effective, wired to a remote detonator, enough to take out Janet's house and a few of the neighbors. Gas mains are a beautiful thing if you know how to use them." Janet, who had been standing in the doorway, clapped a hand over her mouth. Color drained from her face. Carter was already moving, snapping his fingers at Lauren down the hall. "Get them on the radio. Evac protocol now," he said. "We have an active threat." "Derek," I said, voice shaking. "There are families on this street. Children, you can't." "This isn't about them," he cut in. "This is about strategy. Evidence is in that house. You're in that house. Cops are in that house. From where I'm sitting, pushing one button solves a lot of problems at once." "By killing dozens of people," I said. "You're calling that a solution." "Collateral damage," he said. "It's ugly, but sometimes you take the hit to secure the win. You think the people we owe money to care about a few dead suburbanites. They care that we pay them, and the easiest way to do that is to stop this investigation before it buries us." Out front, I heard shouting. Lauren ran past the window, waving her arms, banging on doors. A siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. If you're watching this, this is where you probably yell at your screen. Run! As if there's anywhere to run when your own son is talking about vaporizing you and half the block like he's discussing a chess move. "Derek," I said slowly, "you are talking about murdering strangers, neighbors, aunts, grandparents, kids who ride their bikes past the house." "They're numbers on a ledger," he said. "Sad numbers, sure, but if those numbers mean you and Dad's money stays with us instead of getting seized, that's a trade I can live with." "Dad is dead because of you," I snapped. "And I'm next on your list. You think blowing us up makes you live more." He sighed. "Dad made it hard on himself. He started digging. He should have just trusted us. You should have too. This escalation is on you." Behind him, faintly, I thought I heard another voice. Sienna's, sharp and impatient. They were together. Of course they were. Outside, the quiet street turned into something else entirely. Police cars blocked both ends, lights flashing red and blue against the neat little houses. An armored truck I never thought I'd see in real life rolled slowly into view. Neighbors in pajamas and sweatpants were shepherded away by officers, some crying, some shouting, all of them glancing back at Janet's house like it might already be glowing. "Derek, listen to yourself," I said. "You don't sound like a son, you sound like a terrorist." "That's a very loaded word, Mom," he replied coolly. I prefer someone doing what he has to do. You have one chance to stop this. You walk out that front door alone, no cops, no recording devices, just you. We leave with you, drive away, and this block keeps existing. What happens to me then? I asked. We work something out, he said. You stop talking to Carter, you stop cooperating. Maybe you have a tragic accident later somewhere quiet. Maybe we just relocate you. There are options. Carter made a cutting motion across his throat, mouthing, do not go. I met his eyes and nodded. Derek, I said into the phone, there is no universe where I walk out there and get in a car with you. His voice went flat. Then you're choosing death for all of them too, he said. Interesting moral stance. Saintly mom martyring the cul-de-sac. He hung up. The silence after the call was somehow louder than the ringing had been. Carter grabbed the phone, started barking into his radio. Bomb squad, perimeter, lines of fire, words I'd only heard on TV before now. Janet stood by the window, trembling, watching our neighbors file past the squad cars, some with blankets around their shoulders, some clutching children to their chests. My God, she whispered, they don't even know they're in danger because of us. Because of them, I corrected. This is on Derek and Sienna, not us. We didn't get long to sit with that. The first explosion wasn't a movie-style fireball. It was more like a violent punch to the air, a deep whomp that slammed into the house, rattling the windows and knocking a framed photo off the wall. The light snapped off. The TV went dead. The hum of the fridge vanished. The room plunged into instant, suffocating dark. Janet yelped. Somewhere in the back, glass shattered. Everybody down, Carter shouted, pulling me off the couch and onto the floor behind it. Janet dropped beside us, heart hammering against my arm. The only light came from the faint glow of emergency LEDs along the baseboards and the red eye of a battery-powered smoke detector in the hall. My ears rang. The house smelled like dust and ozone. Was that the bomb? Janet whispered. No, Carter said. He was listening. His head tilted. Too small. They blew a junction or a transformer. They wanted the power out. As if to answer him, my phone vibrated in my hand. No ringtone, just the buzz against my palm. Backup battery mode. An unknown number. I answered, barely breathing. Hi, Mom, Sienna's voice purred in my ear. Miss me. Every hair on my arm stood up. Where are you? I asked. Inside, she said. You really think your big cop friends can wrap this little house in bubble wrap? I grew up here, remember. I know every creak, every loose board, every lock Aunt Janet never fixed. A floorboard groaned somewhere down the hall. Janet gasped. Carter held a finger to his lips, eyes hard. Derek, playing with his new toy outside, Sienna went on conversationally. I told him bombs are messy. I prefer a more intimate approach. Sienna, I said, you don't have to do this. Sure I do, she replied. You are the only thing left between us and an actual life. You and Dad's little bedtime confession to the cops. You walked out of our house this morning when we could have made it quick and painless. Now I get to have some fun. Her footsteps were soft, but I heard them. Slow, deliberate, moving from the kitchen toward the hallway. By the way, she added lightly, you were so worried about my patient count, so here you go for your little ledger. I've killed 7 people. Carefully, efficiently, no questions asked. You, Mom, will be number 8. Feels poetic, doesn't it? 7, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. You're underestimating yourself, sweetheart. Carter's count is higher than that. A low laugh drifted through the phone, and the house at the same time. I always said you were bad at math, she replied. Crouching behind the couch, are you? That's where I'd start. Carter's eyes flicked to mine. He pointed toward the hallway, then toward the back of the house. Lauren and another officer were already moving, quietly, staying low, guns drawn, using the emergency lights like guideposts. You know those scenes in movies where the hero holds their breath, hoping the killer will walk past their hiding spot. That moment where you swear the villain can hear the heartbeat through the wall. It feels exactly like that. except you don't feel like a hero. You feel like a 64-year-old woman in her sister's living room, clutching a phone and praying she doesn't sneeze. Sienna, I said, forcing my voice louder, I have to say, for someone who thinks she's a mastermind, your plan is sloppy. Another step, closer now, the hallway plaster sighed. Oh, she said, do enlighten me. I always did humor your little lectures. You're in a house surrounded by armed police, I said. Your brother's out there threatening to blow up half the neighborhood. Every word you're saying is being recorded. And you're sneaking around with a syringe like this is some private theater. Where exactly do you think this ends? With you on the floor, she replied, and me walking out with a believable story. Maybe you had a stroke from the stress. Maybe you took too many pills. You're fragile, remember. People believe that. People also believe forensics, I said. They believe autopsies, toxicology, testimony from neighbors who heard you gloating about your kill count. She snorted. Mom, no jury is going to buy that their sweet nurse next door murdered her own parents. It's too ridiculous. You sound crazy just saying it. I heard you, I said, on Dad's recorder, calling us assets, talking about phases, about making deaths look natural. You're proud of it. It's your masterpiece. 7 little masterpieces, right? Her steps stopped. Silence stretched. You listen to that, she said, voice sharper now. Without asking me, that's rude. Now you care about consent, I shot back. You've been doozing people without it for years. Something banged softly near the hallway entrance. A shadow moved in the far doorway, just outside the faint emergency glow. If I'm such an amateur, she said, closer now, then why are you hiding in the dark instead of running? Why are you whispering like a scared little girl? Because, I said, my own anger finally breaking through the fear, I raised you. For a second, the room felt absolutely still. I know your tells, I went on. I know when you're overconfident, when you're rushing. You always talk more when you're nervous. You monologue. You did it as a teenager when you were lying about where you'd been, and you're doing it now while officers are triangulating exactly where you are in this house. Across the room, Lauren's radio crackled softly. Visual on target, a voice murmured. Hallway 10 feet from living room entrance, syringe in right hand. You think they're going to shoot me? Sienna asked, amused. They don't want that. They want me to stand trial. They want me in an orange jumpsuit like some cartoon villain. They'll hesitate. That's your strategic flaw, I said. You assume everyone's weakness is the same as yours, but they've already seen what you do to elderly patients, to your own father, to me. There was a faint click. Somewhere outside, generators rumbled to life. The light snapped back on. Janet's living room flooded with harsh, artificial brightness. I blinked against it, eyes stinging. And there she was. Sienna stood in the archway to the hall, about 15 feet away, just like the voice had said. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, face pale, eyes wide and wild. In her right hand, she held a syringe, the barrel glinting under the overhead light. Clear liquid trembled inside. Her gaze met mine. For one dizzy moment, all I saw was my little girl with scraped knees and pigtails, asking for a Band-Aid. Then she smiled, and the illusion shattered. Hi, Mom, she said. Found you. Behind her, in the now-lit hallway, I could see Lauren at the corner, gun raised. 2 more officers were angled in from the kitchen, taking careful aim. Carter was beside me, half-crouched, his own weapon pointed at the floor for now. I stood up. Janet hissed my name, grabbing at my sleeve, but I pulled free. Maggie, Carter said sharply. No more hiding, I said, not taking my eyes off Sienna. She's not the only one who knows this house. I stepped out from behind the couch, into full view. If you're watching this, this is the part where you're yelling at me for being stupid. You're not wrong, but there's something very clarifying about realizing your child won't stop until you're dead. At some point, you stop cowering and start choosing the terms. Drop the syringe, Sienna, I said. It's over. Her eyes flicked past me, taking in the officers, the guns, the return of the power. Cute, she said. You think they're going to shoot me while I'm unarmed if I just let this go? "You're not unarmed," I said. "You're holding a weapon. And you just confessed to 7 murders and threatened to make me number 8. Trust me, the record looks bad." She took a step forward, lifting the syringe just a little. "You really think they're faster than I am?" she asked. "I only have to close 15 feet. 1 jab, 3 seconds. You'd be on the ground before the needle hit the carpet." "You were always dramatic," I said. "Even your murder fantasies come with choreography." Her lips peeled back in a snarl. "You're not funny," she spat. "Actually," I said, letting my voice ring through the room, "I'm the only one here not pointing a weapon at their own mother." Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, pride, the need to win. She lunged. Time slowed and shattered all at once. I saw the flex of her calf, the push off the hardwood, the needle outstretched like a stinger, her face contorted with effort and fury. A single gunshot cracked the air. Sienna jerked mid-stride, her body twisting. The syringe flew from her hand, spinning in an arc before clattering under the coffee table. She hit the floor hard, a strangled scream ripping from her throat. Blood spread quickly across her shoulder, staining her shirt a vivid red. Janet shrieked. I flinched, the sound of the shot ricocheting inside my skull. "Don't move," Lauren shouted, already advancing. "Hands where I can see them." Sienna writhed, clutching at her shoulder, blood slick on her fingers. Her eyes stabbed up at me, full of hate. You did this," she gasped. "Derek," not going to stop. "He'll blow this place to pieces. You think a little hole in my arm changes anything?" Her voice broke on a hysterical laugh. Carter moved in fast, kicking the syringe further away, then dropping to one knee beside her. He read her rights in a calm, steady tone that sounded surreal, layered over her sobbing curses. "You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney." Paramedics rushed in, guided by another officer. One of them knelt to apply pressure to her wound, barking instructions to the other. "BP's dropping. Get a line in. No, away from that arm." Sienna's head lolled toward me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "He's still out there. He has the detonator. He'll finish it. You'll all see." Her words slurred at the edges, as whatever the paramedic pushed into the IV line began to do its work. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, taking in the scene. My daughter, my bright, ambitious, saving lives daughter, on the floor in handcuffs and blood. A yellow evidence marker, already placed beside the syringe, like we were on some procedural drama. The officers, the paramedics, the smell of antiseptic and copper. And threaded through it all, the knowledge that this wasn't some stranger being loaded onto a stretcher. This was my child. I felt something inside me fracture and shift. "Ma'am," Lauren said quietly, coming to my side. "You need to sit down, you're in shock." "I'm fine," I lied. My voice sounded hollow. "I just watched my daughter try to stab me with poison. Again, this is starting to feel repetitive." The joke tasted like sawdust, but saying it somehow kept me from screaming. Outside, above the wail of approaching ambulances, I heard another sound. A distant car engine revving, angry and insistent. Derek. Sienna was alive but out of the game, strapped to a gurney, the law wrapped around her like a net. But her last words clung to me like smoke as they wheeled her out the door. "He's still out there. He has the detonator. He'll finish it." Watching them lift my daughter into the back of the ambulance, handcuffs gleaming against the metal rails, I understood something cold and clear. I just survived the daughter who tried to kill me in the dark. Now I had to face the son who was willing to blow up the world to erase me. The house felt wrong without Sienna's voice in it. Not better, not safer, just stunned, like the walls themselves were trying to process what had just happened. Paramedics wheeled her out the front door, shoulder bandaged, face pale and furious. She kept twisting her head to look back at me, eyes burning with the kind of hatred only a child reserves for a parent who's finally said no and meant it. Then she was gone, the lights still hummed, the house still stood. But Derek was still outside. If you're watching this, this is the part where you'd assume the credits roll. The daughter is in cuffs, The house didn't explode. The mom survives. Happy ending, right? I wish. Carter was at the window, radio in one hand, jaw tight. Red and blue lights washed the walls in a slow, nauseating pulse. The bomb squad truck sat farther down the street, squat and heavy, like it had grown roots in the asphalt. "Any word?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He listened to whatever came crackling through his earpiece, nodded, then finally turned. "Derek's still in the BMW," he said. "Driver's seat. He hasn't moved since the ambulance left." "Is the bomb really out there?" Janet whispered behind me. She'd sunk into an armchair, clutching a throw pillow like it might double as a life vest. Carter's gaze softened just a fraction. "It was," he said. "It isn't anymore." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He glanced back out the window, then motioned me closer, lowering his voice. "The minute Derek made that first threat," he said, "my guys started working the perimeter. We already had a rough schematic because of Rick." My heart thumped at my husband's name. Because of Rick. "He recorded one of their planning sessions," Carter said quietly. "Bomb placement, timer specs, backup triggers, the works. He sent copies to me and to a federal contact the night before he died." He paused. "Your husband knew they were getting ready to escalate. He gave us a head start." Air rushed out of my lungs in a shaky half-laugh, half-sob. "So while Sienna was playing cat and mouse in here," he went on, "the bomb squad found the device and neutralized it. It's already in a containment truck. Whatever Derek is holding now, it's not power. It's plastic and fantasy." "Then why haven't you arrested him yet?" Janet blurted. "Because he doesn't know that," Carter said. "And a cornered man who thinks he still has leverage is easier to talk down than one who realizes he's already lost. We needed Sienna contained first. Now," he tilted his head as my phone buzzed in my hand, "now I'm guessing it's his turn." The screen lit up with Derek's name. My chest tightened. "Speaker?" I asked. He nodded. "Speaker, and this time we lead." I put the phone on the coffee table again, hands trembling only a little. I answered, "Derek." "Mom," his voice was calm, too calm. "How's the shoulder?" I didn't answer. "Cops shoot fast when it's not their mom on the line," he said thoughtfully. "Guess Sienna overestimated the sentimental factor." "Stop," I said. "Here's the situation," he said, cutting past any attempt at small talk. "I'm still here. I still have the detonator. And your babysitters outside seem to think they can just wait me out. That's not going to happen." Carter leaned over and spoke clearly, so the phone would pick him up. "Derek, this is Detective Carter. We can resolve this without anyone else getting hurt if you put the device down and step out of the car with your hands visible." Derek laughed softly. "Detective, you sound like the opening lines of a hostage negotiation podcast. You should charge for this. Too bad you're not in a position to bargain." He continued, conversational, like we were discussing vacation plans instead of mass murder. "I did my homework," he said. "Calculated blast radius, structural vulnerabilities, gas line distribution. That rig you're all so worried about, it's not just going to take out Janet's place. We're talking several homes, half a block easy, fire does the rest." I swallowed, picturing the houses lined up like dominoes outside. The kids' bikes in driveways, garden gnomes, Christmas lights still half up in March because people got lazy. "Derek," I said, "there are children in those homes." "I know," he said softly. "And believe it or not, that's not my first choice either. But Sienna and I are out of runway here. Our options are limited. Either we disappear, or we spend the rest of our natural lives in cages while people like you cluck their tongues over what went wrong with the nice Ellison kids." "You did this to yourselves," I said. "You killed your father." Silence crackled on the line. Carter met my eyes, nodded for me to keep going. "You poisoned him," I said. "You tried to poison me. You stole from your clients. You murdered strangers. And now you want to kill my neighbors and call it strategy." Derek exhaled slowly. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said. "This was never about killing for fun. It was about survival. You and Dad sat in that little Ohio bubble, pretending your safe middle-class life was some moral achievement, while we were the ones staring down real consequences. Real consequences of your crimes, I snapped. Of the system, he corrected. Of debt. Of stupid, petty, dangerous people we got tangled with because we didn't have the advantages you hoarded. The bomb is a reset button. Clean slate. Evidence gone. Problem removed. You're talking about human beings, I said. Not files on a hard drive, not numbers in a ledger. He sighed. Mom, collateral damage is ugly but sometimes necessary. Better a few houses than everything we've built burned down. You should know that. You married an accountant. Carter rolled his eyes silently, but his voice stayed level when he spoke. Derek, he said, I know you think you're holding all the cards right now, but you're working off old information. The situation has changed. Oh, Derek's voice went wry. Did the bomb gods descend from heaven and disarm my little present? Not gods, Carter said. Just a highly trained bomb squad who already knew exactly what to look for because your father told us. Silence. I could hear the faint hum of the BMW's engine through the phone, the distant murmur of officers outside. What are you talking about? Derek said slowly. Rick recorded you, Carter said. He recorded detailed conversations about the device, placement, triggers, backup timers. He handed those recordings over before you ever got around to killing him. We've had your blueprint for days. That's not possible, Derek said, an edge of panic leaking into the words. Dad didn't know. He knew enough to sew a recorder into his suit pocket, I said quietly. Enough to warn me I might be in danger. Enough to tell Detective Carter how to trace your fake charities and shell companies. I swallowed. He knew, Derek. He didn't want to believe it, but he knew. That bomb was neutralized hours ago, Carter continued. The only thing you're holding right now is a dead remote. If you don't believe me, go ahead, press it. There was a beat of horrified silence. Then a sharp click against plastic. Another. Another. Nothing happened. The house did not shake. The lights did not flicker. The world outside stayed stubbornly intact. Sirens, shouting, the faint thump of helicopter blades somewhere overhead. Derek's breathing came faster through the speaker. This is some kind of interference, he said. You're jamming the signal. Keep pressing it, Carter said. Really lean into it. More frantic clicking, rapid fire, like he could brute force reality if he just hit the button enough times. It's not working, Derek muttered. Why isn't it working? Because it's not connected to anything anymore, Carter said. The device is disarmed and in custody. Techs are crawling all over it. You have no leverage left. I closed my eyes, picturing Derek in the driver's seat, jaw clenched, suit jacket rumpled, sweat beating at his temple as the illusion of control evaporated. For the first time, I heard not the cold attorney voice he used in courtrooms and negotiations, but the boy who used to slam broken toys on the floor when they wouldn't work, insisting he could fix them if everyone would just leave him alone. My father didn't know, he whispered. He couldn't have known all of it. He knew enough, I said. He sat in his little home office, the one you despised for not being some corner suite in a skyscraper, and he listened to you and your sister plan our deaths. He knew you were talking to dangerous people. He knew you were in over your head, and he knew you were still his children. You're lying, Derek said, but the conviction was gone. Rick died with a recorder in his pocket and our names in a file titled, If Something Happens to Me, Carter said. He hoped he was wrong, but he prepared like he was right. Something on the other end of the line made a dull thunk, like plastic hitting leather. I imagined the detonator slipping from Derek's hand into the passenger seat. He knew, Derek repeated. He knew we were going to, that we were. Planning to kill him, I finished. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. Planning to kill me, selling other people's lives to pay for your car and your house and your designer shoes. He knew, Derek, and he still went to work, still took your calls, still invited you for dinner. That was his choice, Derek snapped, but the anger sounded brittle. He raised us. He made us. He doesn't get to act shocked when his little creations play the game better than he did. That's what you call this, I said, playing the game. You don't understand, he said, and the words came faster now, rushing out like water behind a cracked dam. You and Dad always had enough. Never rich, never poor, just comfortable, safe. You don't know what it's like to look at that and realize there's nothing like it waiting for you because your parents are too proud to leverage what they have. We would have helped you, I said. We did help you. We helped with law school, with the down payment on your first condo, with everything we could. It wasn't enough, he exploded. Don't you get it? I was never going to climb high enough playing by the rules you loved so much. The partners, kids had trust funds and connections. They didn't worry about student loans. They didn't worry about getting their hands dirty. They had people to do that for them. So you decided to become one of those people, I said. The ones who get others hurt to stay comfortable. I decided I deserved what you never gave yourselves, he shot back. We had assets sitting there doing nothing, insurance policies, the house, investments, and you two kept talking about leaving it when the time was right. We thought that time was when we were dead, I said. Exactly, he said coldly, and you were taking too long. The room tilted for a second. Janet made a strangled sound behind me. Carter didn't interrupt. He let Derek talk, let the quiet do half the work. You poisoned your father, I said softly. You let him think his body was failing him instead of admitting you were. Derek sucked in a shaky breath. Sienna had the medical background, he said. She knew the dosages. I handled logistics, legal angles. It started as a contingency, all right, backup plan. When the debts got worse, when the people we owed started making threats, it moved up the schedule. And me, I asked. You were attached, he said. We couldn't just leave you floating around. You asked questions. You'd cling to detectives like Carter, so we eased you into it. Pills for sleep, pills for blood pressure. You were already on half that stuff. What's one more little adjustment? The room spun again. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself. So this whole thing, I said slowly, the bomb, the poison, the stolen lives, you've been rationalizing it for how long, Derek? Months, years. Since college, he said. Since I started seeing the gap between what I was promised and what was real. You and Dad talked about hard work and honesty, but the men at the top had very different rules. I decided I was done being the sucker who believed your fairy tales. My throat tightened. Your father died still believing there was a part of you that could turn back, I said. He could have gone to the police sooner. He waited. He hoped. He was wrong, Derek whispered. Yes, I said, but he loved you anyway. Silence stretched. When Derek spoke again, his voice had changed. Less steel, more something raw and unfamiliar. If he knew, he said, if he really knew what we were planning, why didn't he, I don't know, cut us off, turn us in? Why did he keep sending those stupid texts and leaving those voicemails about family dinners and game night? Because he was your father, I said. Because some part of him thought if he gave you one more chance, you'd choose not to become exactly what you are right now. And what is that? He asked quietly. I looked at the phone like I might see his face in the screen. You're my son, I said. And you're a murderer, both are true, only one was your choice. On the other end, I heard him inhale sharply, like the words hit something he hadn't armored properly. He would have hated me, Derek muttered. He already knew what you'd done, I said. He still recorded everything, not just to protect me, to protect the people you were hurting. He chose to be a good man even when his children weren't. That's who he was. A choked sound came through the line. For a bizarre second, I thought he was laughing again. Then I realized he was crying. I didn't think he'd actually, Derek's voice broke. I thought he was clueless, Mom. I thought we were smarter than him. You're not, I said simply. You're clever, there's a difference. Clever breaks things, smart knows what's worth saving. Another long silence. Outside, I saw movement near the BMW, dark shapes lowering themselves behind patrol cars, shifting position, creeping closer. Carter tapped the phone, making sure Derek was still on speaker. His voice was gentler when he spoke. "Derek," he said, "you know how this ends if you keep pretending that detonator works. There's no way out of this that involves Costa Rica and offshore accounts. That door closed the minute your father hit record." "You don't know what we've set up," Derek said weakly. "New names, accounts, a house near the beach, no extradition. We could have started over." "You can't start over on bones," I said. "Every life you took comes with you. There is no country far enough away to outrun that." He sniffed, loud in the speaker. When he spoke again, some of the old defensive arrogance crept back in. "So what?" he said. "I get out of the car, put my hands up, and you just, haul me off to join Sienna in an orange jumpsuit. And you, Mom, do what? Visit on holidays, bake cookies for death row." "I don't know what I'll do," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can look at you through glass and hear you call me Mom without wanting to break. But I do know this. If you die out there by suicide by cop, that's the only story left. Rick's son who tried to blow up a neighborhood because he couldn't stand facing what he did." Carter stepped closer, voice firm. "Or," he said, "you can get out of the car, put the remote down, and let the record show that at the very end you stopped. That you didn't pull a trigger that would have killed those kids in the blue house on the corner. That you didn't add another row of names to the list." "Do you have any idea what they'll do to me in prison?" Derek whispered. "White-collar guys don't get respect in there, and that's before they find out about the rest." "Yes," I said softly. "And you know what they'd do to your victims if they were still alive. Ask them how it felt to trust you with their money, their health, their parents. Ask them if you deserve comfort now." He let out a long, shaking breath. "Do you think," he asked, almost childlike, "that he would have forgiven us if he'd lived long enough to see all of this?" I thought of Rick at his desk in that stupid sweater with the frayed cuffs, typing out meticulous notes while his heart broke. I thought of his last letter, the one I'd read in the funeral home, signed with love even as he admitted he feared his own children. "I think he loved you," I said, "and I think he believed that what you've done is unforgivable. Both can be true. Forgiveness isn't a pass. It's grief with nowhere else to go." Another silence, then a soft, final clatter on his end, like plastic being set on the dashboard. Through the window, I saw the BMW's driver's side door slowly swing open. "I'm sorry," Derek said. The arrogance was gone now. All that was left was a hollow, exhausted man. "For Dad, for you, for all of it. I didn't think it would get this far." "It got exactly as far as you pushed it," I said, "but you can stop pushing now." "Will you," his voice caught, "will you visit me, later, when this circus is whatever it's going to be?" I swallowed. The answer sat in my chest heavy and bitter. "I don't know," I said. "I'm still trying to survive what you've already done. I can't promise you anything more than that." A tiny, broken laugh came through the speaker. "Fair enough," he whispered. "You always did hate making promises you weren't sure you could keep." Outside, Derek stepped out of the car. He looked smaller than I remembered, even in the dark, his shoulders bowed, his hands lifting slowly into the air. Tactical officers rose up from behind their cover like ghosts, guns trained, voices shouting commands I couldn't make out through the glass. "Walk backward, hands where we can see them." He obeyed. For once in his life, my son did exactly what he was told. They reached him at the edge of the streetlight's wash. One officer grabbed his wrists, twisting them behind his back with efficient movements. The metal glinted as the cuffs snapped shut. Another swept the car, pulled the useless detonator from the seat, held it up in a gloved hand. Carter's radio crackled. Device confirmed inert, suspect in custody. He exhaled, shoulders dropping, then looked at me. "It's done," he said. I stepped closer to the window, pressing my fingers lightly to the cool glass. They were walking Derek toward a waiting squad car now. His head turned just enough that I could see his profile, the strong nose he got from Rick, the stubborn jaw he got from me. For a moment, his eyes seemed to search the house, scanning the windows. I didn't know if he could see me. I saw him. The monster who helped plan my murder. The little boy who used to fall asleep on Rick's chest during Sunday football games. both walking away in the same body, hands chained, life reduced to a case number. The officer guided his head down as they put him into the back seat. The door shut with a heavy, final sound. The detonator, bagged and tagged, dangled from another officer's hand like a cheap toy. I stood there, caught between the urge to sob and the urge to scream, feeling something inside me drain out and something else harden in its place. If you're still here, if you're still listening, this is where I tell you the truth nobody wants to hear. Sometimes justice and heartbreak walk side by side out into the flashing lights. Watching them drive my son away, I felt both. When the last squad car pulled away, the street looked wrong. No sirens, no flashing lights, no bomb truck hulking at the curb like a steel animal, just quiet cul-de-sac darkness, the kind you only notice after it's been ripped away. Inside, Janet's house was slowly trying to remember it was a home. Someone had pushed the couch back where the SWAT team had moved it. A broken picture frame lay face down near the hallway, glass swept into a sad little pile. The air still smelled like sweat, gun oil, and the faint metallic tang of blood from where Sienna had hit the floor. I sat at the kitchen table with my fingers wrapped around a mug of tea I couldn't taste. My hands had finally stopped shaking, but my insides hadn't caught up yet. Across from me, Detective Lucas Carter flipped open a thick, battered folder and set a small black thumb drive next to it. His tie was loosened, his hair mussed, his eyes tired, but his voice, when he spoke, was steady. "All right, Mrs. Ellison," he said quietly. "You've heard pieces of this. You deserve the whole picture." "If you're still watching," I told the invisible audience in my head, "this is the part nobody thinks about when they binge the crime shows. The part after the arrest, when the adrenaline dies and the paperwork begins, when you find out just how deep the rot went." I blew on the tea, stalling. "Go ahead," I said. He tapped the folder. "Your husband didn't just give us recordings of Derek and Sienna talking," he said. "He mapped out a network." "A network," I repeated dully. "Like a club." "Like an ecosystem," Carter said. "Predators, scavengers, parasites, all feeding off the same food source, vulnerable people and their money." He slid a sheet of paper toward me. Rick's handwriting marched across it in neat blue lines. Names, dates, little coded notes I now knew were anything but hypothetical. "Sienna first," Carter said. "She was our entry point. Rick recognized patterns before anyone else did. A cluster of elderly patients with similar medication changes right before they died. Unusual chart corrections, orders that didn't match their histories." He flipped to another page. There were columns now: patient initials, age, date of death, estate beneficiaries. 17 confirmed so far, he said. Maybe as many as 23 once the medical examiner finishes cross-referencing. Most of them lived alone or had distant family. Suddenly, right before they died, their wills got updated. Donations to charities that, when you pull the paperwork apart, lead straight to Shell Foundation's Derek set up. My stomach rolled. So she was killing them, and he was cashing them out. "Pretty much," Carter said. She'd gently encourage them to simplify their affairs, recommend a trusted legal professional. That professional would be your son. He'd draw up powers of attorney, new wills, beneficiary changes. After they died, he'd guide everything into accounts he controlled. He said it calmly, clinically, but his jaw tightened at the edges. "All those holiday dinners," I whispered, "and I was bragging about my nurse daughter who takes such good care of her patients. My son, the brilliant attorney. God." Janet, at the counter behind me, made a low sound and turned away, her shoulders shaking. "And the drugs?" I asked, because apparently I hate myself enough to want the details. "Sienna diverted a significant amount of medication from the hospital," Carter said. "Opioids, cardiac drugs, sedatives, some she used in the murders. The rest she sold or traded." "To who?" I asked. He opened another section of the file. "Dealers," he said. "Derek had clients who ran cash-heavy businesses. Restaurants, clubs, so-called consulting firms. A few of those were fronts for drug operations. They needed clean money. Derek gave them that. In return, they provided cash, favors, and sometimes muscle. He pointed with his pen, drawing invisible lines between names. Drug dealers bring in dirty money, he said. They hand it to Derek, who runs it through fake real estate deals, bogus nonprofit donations, and client accounts. It comes out looking squeaky clean. Sienna feeds them meds and patient data. Other corrupt players in the chain look the other way for a fee. Estate lawyers, notaries, 1 or 2 administrators at her hospital. You're telling me my husband, my quiet, Sudoku-doing husband, stumbled into this by accident? My voice sounded far away. Carter shook his head. He didn't stumble, he said. He noticed there's a difference. He started with one odd pattern, an elderly client whose estate went somewhere unexpected. A note in a file that didn't add up. He followed it. Every name on these pages is here because Rick refused to let his questions slide. He tapped the thumb drive. Then, when he realized his own kids were at the center of it, he didn't stop. Most people would have looked away. He didn't. I stared at the thumb drive like it was a loaded gun. How long was he doing this? About 6 months before his death, Carter said. Maybe longer on his own before he called us. When he came to me, he had spreadsheets, timelines, flow charts, even basic risk analysis. For the first time, something like respect flickered openly across his face. I've seen detectives with fewer organized notes. Tears burned the back of my eyes. Rick, hunched over his desk late at night. Me complaining about the light under the door, asking if he was ever coming to bed. Him smiling that tired little smile. He hadn't been doing extra tax returns. He'd been trying to stop our children from becoming serial predators. I swallowed hard. If he hadn't, I couldn't finish. Carter understood anyway. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. You'd be dead, he said bluntly. Janet sucked in a sharp breath. I flinched, but I didn't look away. Between the toxicology we've got from Rick's exhumation and the patterns in your blood work so far, he went on, Sienna had already started the process on you. Low-dose poisoning, just like your husband. Your symptoms would have gotten worse. Fatigue, palpitations. Maybe a fall or a stroke during a nap. He lifted one shoulder. Cause of death, complications of age and grief, very tragic, very clean. And they would have cried at my funeral, I said flatly. Derek would have handled the paperwork. Sienna would have sung another hymn. And the insurance payouts and property transfers would have gone through with minimal scrutiny, Carter said. 2 elderly deaths in a short span. People might raise an eyebrow, but with your medical records and Sienna vouching as a nurse, it would have slid. Then what? I asked. They move on, find new parents to kill. He picked up a different sheet, the one covered in Rick's neat, horrible handwriting. Then they keep doing what they were already doing, he said. Targeting isolated seniors, steering their assets, feeding data to criminals, using stolen meds to grease deals. We're talking dozens more victims over the next few years at least. Rick's notes alone identified 9 potential future targets they had already started circling. 9, I whispered, on top of the 17 to 23 they already killed. He nodded. If your husband hadn't started digging when he did, we estimate the body count would easily have doubled before anyone noticed a pattern. Maybe more. By the time it hit my desk, Derek and Sienna would have been ghosts. New names, new accounts, new clinic, new firm, same game. The room tilted slightly, like I was on the deck of a ship. So he didn't just save me, I said slowly. He saved them. Them, Carter asked. They're future victims, I said. Those 9, the ones after, the people who'll never know they almost sat across from my daughter and signed their lives away. The patients who'll never know how close they came to getting the wrong dose. I pressed my palms against the warm mug, trying to ground myself. All this time, I whispered, I thought he was just tired. He'd sit at that desk and rub his eyes and I'd nag him to retire. You've done enough, Rick, I'd say. Let the kids take care of us for a change. The irony burned so hot, it almost made me laugh. Carter's voice softened. He chose not to retire from being a decent human being, he said. It cost him, but it also means we can charge Derek and Sienna with a lot more than just killing their parents. Rick's documentation is the backbone of a case that brings down an entire network. I looked at the folder, at the thumb drive, at my husband's tidy, relentless handwriting. He must have been so scared, I said, living in the same house with them, knowing what they were planning, trying to be normal so they wouldn't suspect, still joking with them on the phone, still asking about the grandkids. He was scared, Carter said. He told me as much, but he was more scared of what would happen if he did nothing. I felt something inside me twist, and then settle into a new, painful shape. For weeks, I'd been carrying one story in my chest. My husband died a victim, and I was almost next. Now, another story laid itself over that one like tracing paper. My husband died a victim. And my husband died a hero. He gave up his peace of mind, his sleep, his illusion of a happy family to stare straight into what our children had become and say, "No, not on my watch." And I hadn't seen it, not really. "I should have noticed," I muttered. The long nights, the way he flinched when Derek snapped at him, how quiet he got after Sienna's visits. I was right there and I missed it. Carter shook his head sharply. "No," he said. "Stop that right there. Your children hid their crimes from everyone. Judges, physicians, colleagues, me for a while. They weaponized your love. That's on them, not on you." His eyes were steady on mine. Rick knew exactly what he was asking of himself when he started this. He didn't ask you to carry that burden because he loved you. Don't take that and twist it into guilt. He'd hate that. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it angrily away. Janet came over and squeezed my shoulder, her hand warm and solid. "So what now?" I asked. "For them, for us." "For them," Carter said. "Now that Derek is in custody and Sienna is under guard at the hospital, we move into full prosecution mode. The DA's office is already assembling a task force. There will be multiple charges: murder, conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, racketeering. Federal agencies are getting involved because of the financial network and the drug angle." He exhaled. "They're not getting out, Maggie, not on a technicality, not with what your husband left us." "And for us?" I asked again. He closed the folder. The sound felt like punctuation. "For you," he said, "there's a process, statements, court dates, probably media attention given how unusual this is." His gaze softened. "But beyond that, you get to decide who you are next, not as Rick's wife, not as Derek and Sienna's mother, as you." That word felt foreign. "Me," I repeated. "What does that even look like now?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know this much. You're here because Rick refused to let his kids write the ending. He did everything he could to buy you time. What you do with it is yours." I sat there, listening to the fridge hum and the pipes creak and Janet's quiet sniffles behind me. If you're still with me, if you're still listening, this is where the story stops being about bombs and sirens and starts being about something quieter and harder, choosing to keep living after the worst happens. My children are criminals. Not troubled, not misunderstood, not led astray. They chose greed over love, cruelty over decency, strategy over humanity. They killed strangers and they tried to kill us. That is one truth. My husband saw it, and instead of looking away, he turned toward it. He documented, recorded, mapped, and trusted the right people. He spent the last months of his life standing between me and the worst thing I can imagine, even while that worst thing had our children's faces. That is another truth. Both live in me now, side by side. They don't cancel each other out. They just coexist like two scars that tell different parts of the same story. Janet refilled my tea, because sisters do practical things when the universe explodes. Carter gathered his files, preparing to leave us to the night. He paused at the door. "Maggie," he said, "if it's any comfort at all in my line of work, I don't see a lot of heroes. I see people who break, people who run, people who look the other way." He lifted the folder. "Your husband didn't. That matters." After he left, the house finally fell into real silence. No radios, no boots, just the ticking clock over Janet's stove. I sat alone at the table for a long time, staring at my hands. At the indentation where my wedding band had been before they took it for evidence, and then pressed it back into my palm earlier that night. I slid it on again, feeling the cool metal settle into the familiar groove. "I owe you," I whispered into the quiet, twice. Once for 39 years of shared life, for mortgage payments and birthdays and whispered arguments and bad jokes and Sunday pancakes. And once for this, for the spreadsheets and recordings and late-night calls, for the terror he swallowed so I could be standing here in my sister's kitchen, breathing. You can call it a true crime story if you want. You can call it a psychological thriller. For me, it's simpler and harder. My husband died, protecting me from our children. Now I have to live in a way that honors that, instead of letting what they became swallow everything. That's the next chapter. And whether anyone's watching or not, I plan to write it. By the time the trial starts, my name has become a headline I never asked for. The ELLISON horror, one tabloid screams. Children of Greed, another one calls it, over a split image of Derek's law firm headshot and Sienna in her nurse scrubs, smiling like she hasn't killed anyone. Talk shows do segments about us. There are podcast series, YouTube breakdowns with red arrows and dramatic music. Strangers argue in comment sections about whether parents can create monsters like mine. Outside the courthouse in Columbus, cameras sprout like weeds along the steps. Reporters call my name when I walk past, their voices too bright for the topic. Mrs. Ellison, do you blame yourself? Do you still love your children? Can you look them in the eye? Most days I keep my gaze on the granite steps and just keep climbing. Surviving the process takes everything I have. I have nothing left for sound bites. Inside, Courtroom 4B feels like a theater built to contain other people's worst days. The ceilings are high, the wood dark and polished, the seal of the state looming over the judge like a second, unblinking eye. The gallery is packed every session, elderly victims' families in their best church clothes, young reporters with open laptops, sketch artists, rubberneckers who got there early enough to grab a seat. On the prosecution side, binders and bankers' boxes form small fortresses. On the defense side, sleek leather portfolios and two very expensive attorneys who arrived too late to save their clients from themselves. And at the defense table sit my children. If you're still here with me, if you've watched this far, this is the part everyone thinks they're prepared for. They aren't. Derek is in a charcoal suit and a county-issued ankle cuff, the chain tucked under the table. His hair is thinner, his jawline softer, but his eyes are the same sharp, assessing blue he had as a boy when he'd size up a chessboard. Sienna wears a pale blouse and dark slacks, her arm moving stiffly where the bullet shattered and healed. No designer scrubs, no carefully curated nurse-next-door image now. Just pale skin, flat eyes, and a sheriff's deputy at each shoulder. They both keep their faces carefully neutral, like they're trying to out-lawyer and out-clinician the cameras. I sit behind the prosecution's table with Janet, clutching a tissue that has already given up on staying whole. Carter sits at the end of the row, close enough that I can feel his steady presence even when I'm staring straight ahead. State of Ohio versus Derek James Ellison and Sienna Marie Ellison, the clerk intones, as if we're talking about parking tickets. Then the evidence begins. It starts with money, because juries understand that. Numbers on screens, bank accounts, wire transfers. The prosecutor, a woman named Karen Walsh with steel in her voice, walks them through Derek's fake charities and shell corporations. The projector paints the wall with forged signatures I now recognize as my own, reproduced in sickening detail. "That is your signature, Mrs. Ellison," she asks at one point. "Yes," I say into the microphone, "but I did not sign that." The jury stares at the screen. At me. At Derek, who stares straight ahead like this is a tedious seminar. They see the house Derek tried to sell from under me, the properties flipped, the donations that looped back into accounts he controlled. Then they move to Sienna. Altered hospital records, medication logs with dosages changed by a single line. An attending physician testifies that he never ordered some of the adjustments bearing his stamped signature. An elderly woman, cane shaking in her hand, describes how a very kind nurse named Sienna recommended Derek when she wanted to get her affairs in order. Her son sits behind her, jaw clenched, fingers digging crescents into his knees. And then, because there is no way to tell this story without it, they press play on the recordings. Rick's voice first. Calm, steady, time-stamped. "This is Richard Ellison. Date." He documents conversations, explains context, names names. Then Derek, tinny and clear over the speakers. "He's getting suspicious, Sienna. The old man asking too many questions." The jury flinches at old man. I flinch at the casual contempt. Another clip. Sienna, clinical and bored. "Potassium chloride, Derek. Small doses over months for baseline change, then one larger one. At his age, with his history, it'll read like a heart event. No one's going to dig up a grieving accountant from a small town." Someone in the pew behind me swears under their breath. A juror covers her mouth. More snippets. "Do you know what the house will fetch once she's gone? 2 funerals in the same year is a hassle, but the payoff is worth it. She's already tired all the time. We just help nature along." Listening in that quiet, air-conditioned room is somehow worse than hearing it alone at my kitchen table. Here, surrounded by strangers, I can feel the collective intake of breath, the disbelief curdling into understanding. These aren't just my broken children anymore. They are defendants, predators, case studies. At one point, I risk a look at them. Derek's grip on his pen is white-knuckled, but his face is stone. Sienna stares straight ahead, eyes slightly unfocused, as if she's watching her own life on someone else's screen. Karen moves efficiently through the financial documents, the altered charts, the toxicology from Rick's exhumation and my own blood work. The medical examiner explains, in carefully chosen layman's terms, how the poisoning worked, how someone with access and knowledge could mimic disease. Then comes the moment Carter warned me about. The state would now like to play a final recording made by Mr. Richard Ellison 3 days before his death, Karen says. My heart doesn't just pound, it clenches. The lights dim slightly as the media screens are adjusted. For once, the reporters stop typing. Static crackles, then Rick's voice fills the courtroom. "This is Richard Ellison," he says. His voice is softer here, not the precise tone he used when outlining evidence. "If you're hearing this, something has happened to me." He pauses. I can hear the catch in his breath that I never heard in real time, on those ordinary days when he kissed my cheek and said he was going to finish some paperwork. "This is for my wife, Maggie," he continues, "for the officers handling this case, and for my children, Derek and Sienna." The room shrinks around me. "To the authorities," he says, his tone firming. "I've given Detective Carter everything I can. The names, the accounts, the patterns. You should have enough to see where the money goes, where the drugs come from, and what my kids have been doing with both." The jurors look from the speakers to Derek and Sienna, as if expecting them to object, to shout, to vanish. They don't. "To Derek and Sienna," Rick goes on, and here his voice breaks in a way that slices me open. "I don't know the exact moment when you crossed this line. I don't know when wanting more turned into taking lives. I remember scraped knees and piano recitals, science fairs and prom nights. Somewhere between then and now, you chose a different path." He swallows. The microphone picks up the tiny sound. "I need you to understand something," he says. "This is your choice. This cruelty, the lies, the greed. Your mother and I did not put this in you. You are not broken because of us. You are responsible for what you've done, and you will be responsible for what happens next." He lets out a long breath that fuzzes at the edges of the recording. "And to my Maggie," he says, and my name in his tired voice undoes whatever composure I thought I had. Tears spill over and I stop trying to blink them back. "You are going to try to blame yourself," he says. "I know you. You will replay every moment and ask what you missed, what you could have done differently. Don't." He speaks directly into the microphone now, as if he's leaning across time and wood and dust to grab my shoulders. "This is not your fault," he says. "You loved our kids, you believed the best of them, that's what good mothers do. You trusted me, you trusted them. None of that is a crime." My vision blurs. The judge, the flags, the seal all smear into color. I started this investigation because I saw things you didn't see, Rick says. Because I had access to numbers and patterns you weren't supposed to understand. I did not tell you because I wanted to protect you for as long as I could. His voice softens. If I'm gone, it means I ran out of time doing that, he says. But it also means I believed something with my whole heart, that you are strong enough to survive this. To stand up in a courtroom like this one and tell the truth. To walk out afterward and build something new for yourself, even if it looks nothing like the life we imagined. He laughs once, quietly, humor and pain tangled together. Live well, Mags, he says. Please, don't let what they became be the last word. I love you. I always have. I always will. The recording clicks off. Silence crashes into the room. Someone in the second row is openly sobbing. One of the jurors has tears on her cheeks. The judge's expression doesn't change, but his hand flexes once on the armrest, like he's keeping something steady. I am crying, not delicately but in a raw, messy way, one hand over my mouth. Janet presses a tissue into my palm and curls her arm around mine. I force myself to look at my children. For the first time in months, Derek's mask has slipped. His eyes are wet. His jaw works as if he's grinding down words he can't afford to say. Sienna's face is pale, her lips pressed thin, but there is a flicker in her expression that I can't name. Anger, grief, annoyance at being called out, maybe all three. The recording becomes the spine of the trial. It's not just evidence, it's context. A moral compass laid gently on the table. Rick's voice drawing a line between love and accountability and refusing to let anyone blur it. Weeks pass in a blur of expert testimony, motions, objections. The jury watches charts and listens to people with titles explain why this wasn't a misunderstanding, why it couldn't have been an accident. Then, finally, it's time. We file in to hear the verdict, like people walking into a storm they can't outrun. On the charge of first-degree murder of Richard Ellison, the foreperson reads, we find the defendant, Sienna Marie Ellison, guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The word repeats, attaching itself to each count. Murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse. Sienna doesn't flinch. Her eyes close once, briefly, as if against a bright light, then open again. For the defendant, Derek James Ellison, the foreperson continues, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. More charges: money laundering, wire fraud, identity theft, racketeering. Every time the word guilty lands, something inside me loosens, tiny knots untying one by one. Sentencing happens days later, but the air in the room feels just as thick. The judge looks older than he did at the start of all this. He regards my children for a long moment before he speaks. Ms. Ellison, he says to Sienna, you use the trust and authority of your profession to prey on people at their most vulnerable. You violated your oath as a nurse, your duty as a daughter, and the most basic tenets of human decency. He lists her counts, her victims, the aggravating factors. Then he delivers the sentence. On the counts of first-degree murder, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. There's a rustle in the gallery, a muffled sob of relief from someone whose parent is on that list of 17 to 23. Sienna's jaw tightens, but she offers no apology, no plea. Her eyes slide once briefly in my direction. I don't know what she's looking for. I don't have it to give. Mr. Ellison, the judge turns to Derek. You orchestrated elaborate financial schemes to profit off death and suffering. You conspired in the murders of your own parents. The court has rarely seen planning this cold, this calculated, carried out with this level of entitlement. He cites the guidelines, the mandatory minimums. It all blurs together until the numbers crystallize. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, he says. On the associated financial crimes and racketeering counts, an additional. He rattles off decades that don't matter, stacked on top of forever, to be served consecutively. He asks Derek if he'd like to make a statement. Derek stands, shackles clinking softly. For a second, he looks like the boy who brought me a crumpled Mother's Day card and asked if I liked it. "I'm sorry," he says, voice rough. He glances back past the attorneys toward the rows of people whose lives he tore open. To the families, to everyone. His gaze meets mine. "And to you, Mom," he says. "For Dad, for everything, I don't expect forgiveness. I am sorry." There might be real fear in his eyes, maybe even real regret, but remorse doesn't resurrect anyone. It doesn't erase the recordings or the poison or the bomb threat. The judge nods curtly. "Your apologies might have meant more before you started planning mass murder," he says, and with that, it's done. Gavels only make a sound in movies. Here, the judge's final words land with a dull, heavy weight instead. Court adjourned. People exhale. Some hug. Some cry. Some just sit, stunned, as if their bodies forgot what to do after holding so much tension for so long. Me. I feel not triumphant. There is no version of this where I walk out of here winning. I don't feel vindictive, either. The hate burned out of me somewhere between bomb threats and whispered taunts in the dark. What's left is relief. Relief that they can't hurt anyone else now. Relief that Rick's meticulous work wasn't in vain, that his spreadsheets and files and late-night whispers built a case strong enough to hold. Relief that the question, will they get away with it, has finally, definitively been answered. As the deputies lead Derek and Sienna away, I watch them go. My son, my daughter, in matching restraints. I don't wave. I don't turn away. I just let both truths sit in my chest again, heavy and immovable. They were my Bobbies. They are killers. Rick loved them. Rick stopped them. Outside. The cameras are waiting like vultures on the courthouse steps. Mrs. Ellison, how do you feel about the sentence? Do you think justice was served? Do you have a message for other families? The questions swirl around me, sticky and insistent. I keep my eyes on the parking lot, putting one foot in front of the other. A familiar figure steps into my path, not to block me, but to give me something solid to aim for. Carter. He says something quietly to the nearest reporter, and they ease back an inch, just enough for me to breathe. We reach the bottom of the steps together. The Ohio air is cool on my damp face. "So," he says gently, once we're clear of the microphones, "what now, Maggie? What do you plan to do next?" For the first time in a long time, the question is, how do we survive them? Or how do we stop them? It's just about me. I look back at the courthouse doors, then up at the sky that has the nerve to be bright and blue, like nothing monumental just happened. I don't know exactly, I say, and that's the honest truth. But then I think of Rick's voice in that courtroom, telling me to live well, to not let what they became be the last word. I think, I add slowly, I'm finally going to find out who I am without being somebody's wife or somebody's mother. He nods once, approval in his eyes. That, he says, sounds like a good place to start. The reporters keep shouting behind us. The cameras keep rolling. Somewhere a headline is already being drafted. But for the first time since this nightmare began, the story doesn't feel like it belongs to them. It feels like it might, just maybe, belong to me. Paris doesn't sound real when you say it out loud too many times. It sounds like a movie set, or something people put on mugs and refrigerator magnets. But it's very real when you're sitting at a little metal table on a sidewalk, your knees almost touching the street, with the smell of fresh bread and exhaust fighting for space in the air. Several weeks after the trial, that's where I am. A cafe near the corner of some street I still can't pronounce properly. The sky is pale blue, the air cool but not cold, and the people around me are busy living lives that have absolutely nothing to do with dead accountants, poisoned coffee, or children in handcuffs. Couples share pastries, leaning in close, sugar dusting their fingers. A businessman in a navy coat walks by with his phone pressed to his ear, laughing about something that clearly isn't murder charges. A little girl in a red beret drags a stuffed rabbit through a puddle while her mother sighs and gives up trying to keep it clean. For a long time, I sit there and just watch. If you've been with me since the beginning of this story, you know where I came from to end up here. From a quiet house in Ohio that turned out to be a crime scene long before the police ever showed up. From the chaos of sirens and bomb squads in courtrooms. From a life defined by roles that were burned down in the span of a few months. The old house is gone now. I don't mean literally demolished. Someone will buy it, repaint it, hang their own family pictures where mine once hung. But it's gone for me. I sold it before the trial even started. Janet told me I didn't owe four walls my loyalty just because I'd made birthday cakes and Christmas dinners inside them. Leave it, she said, when I hesitated over the paperwork. You don't need a shrine to the worst year of your life. So I did. I packed what I could bear to look at, donated what I couldn't, and signed away the place where I raised my children and almost died. Janet was the one who shoved the brochure across her kitchen table afterward. Paris on the cover, of course. You and Rick always said, someday, she reminded me. Maybe someday is now before you talk yourself out of it. Rick and I used to say that a lot. Someday we'll go to Europe. Someday we'll sit in a little cafe. Someday we'll see Rome in person instead of on the History Channel while we fall asleep. Someday was always after retirement, after the mortgage, after the kids were settled. Someday was the reward for doing everything right. We never scheduled the part where our kids tried to kill us. So here I am, using the money my husband died to protect, sitting in Paris without him. It's a strange kind of cruelty and kindness at the same time. My coffee has gone lukewarm by the time my phone buzzes on the table. The number is unfamiliar, but after everything I've been through, an unknown number doesn't scare me anymore. I slide my finger across the screen. This is Maggie, I say. A bright, professional voice answers. Mrs. Ellison, hi, this is Paige Reynolds with the Victim Rights Coalition. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I look around at the tiny table, the narrow street, the waiter balancing a tray of croissants like he's performing magic. Somewhere behind me, dishes clink and someone laughs in French. A bad time, that's relative. It's okay, I say. What can I do for you? She explains who they are, how they've been following the case, how they support families affected by elder abuse, financial exploitation, and the kind of betrayal that sounds like fiction until you're the one signing the police statements. We're hosting a conference in the fall, she says. We wondered if you might be willing to speak. You don't have to decide now, of course, but your story could really help people recognize red flags before it's too late, help them feel less alone. For a second, I can almost see it. Me at a podium, lights in my face, rows of people looking up at me the way I once looked at experts on TV. Maggie Ellison, case study, cautionary tale, survivor. My stomach tightens. I appreciate the invitation, I tell her, and I mean it. I'm not sure I'm ready to be anything more than a person on vacation right now. Paige doesn't push. That makes perfect sense, she says gently. Healing first. If you ever decide you want to talk about speaking or even just about resources, call me. I'll email you my contact info. We say goodbye. I end the call and set the phone down, my reflection staring back at me in the smudged black screen. Do I want to be that person? The one people point to when they talk about what can go wrong inside a family. The woman on panels and podcasts, dissecting the worst parts of her life for the sake of other people's safety. I don't know, not yet. What I do know is that, for the first time, the idea doesn't feel like a sentence. It feels like an option, a possibility on a shelf I can reach for later, if and when I'm ready. The waiter appears with a fresh cup of coffee without asking, as if he's decided I need it more than I need the euros. Merci, I say, and he smiles politely before vanishing back inside. Steam curls up in delicate spirals, warming my face. Rick's voice drifts back to me again. Not from a courtroom speaker this time, but from the space in my mind where I keep that last recording. The part where he told me to live well, to love again if I wanted to not let what Derek and Sienna became control the rest of my story. Live well, Mags. I'm not sure what love again will ever look like, or if I even want it. But living well, that part I'm starting to understand. It looks like choosing where I want to wake up in the morning, instead of waiting for someone else to tell me where to be. It looks like buying a plane ticket without asking anyone's permission. It looks like sitting alone in a Paris cafe and realizing I don't feel like half a person without my old titles. I am more than Rick's wife and Derek and Sienna's mother. Those roles were real and important, and they nearly killed me. Now I get to find out what exists outside of them. I reach into my bag and pull out a guidebook that still smells faintly of new paper. Paris is dog-eared already, scribbled with Janet's suggestions and my own notes. Today, I flip past it and find Rome. Little glossy photos stare up at me. The Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, a street lined with scooters and laundry strung between buildings. Rick always wanted to see Rome. Real history under your feet, he used to say, not just the local museum version. My chest aches, a familiar burn that no medication can touch, but there's something else braided into it now. Gratitude. He didn't get to stand in line for espresso with me, or complain about the unfamiliar currency, or pretend not to be impressed by old stones. But because of what he did at the end, because he chose to act instead of look away, I get to be here to feel his absence. Living fully is the closest thing I have to a thank you big enough for that. I circle a few places on the map with my pen. Maybe I'll see the Sistine Chapel. Maybe I'll just get lost on side streets and eat too much gelato. Maybe I'll sit on the Spanish Steps and talk to someone whose life is as far from mine as possible. And now, since we started this whole thing with a story told into a camera, let's circle back to that, shall we? If you've watched this all the way through, if you've listened to a 64-year-old woman from Ohio talk about the worst and strangest year of her life, thank you. Wherever you are watching from, whatever you were supposed to be doing instead of listening to me, I'm strangely honored you stayed. Here's the part where I'm supposed to give you advice, right? So here it is plain. Pay attention to the small things that don't add up, the jokes that feel like tests, the signatures that don't look quite right, the way someone talks about money like it's worth more than people. Don't ignore red flags just because they're attached to people you love. And if something in my story sounds uncomfortably close to your own, you're not weak or foolish for being blindsided. You're human. Trust can be used as a weapon against good people. That doesn't mean you deserved it. If you feel like sharing, tell me your story in the comments, or type it out and never hit send. Sometimes putting words around the nightmare is the first crack in its armor. If you want to hear more stories like this, or you think someone else needs to hear mine, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, stick around, and maybe the next time we talk, it'll be about something softer than murder and betrayal. Maybe we'll talk about starting over, or about where you'd go if you finally booked a ticket for your own someday. For now, though, this chapter is done. I finish my coffee. The cup clinks gently against the saucer. Chairs scrape the pavement around me as people come and go, oblivious to the epic I've been carrying in my chest. I tuck the guidebook back into my bag, stand up, and smooth the front of my jacket like I'm about to walk into an ordinary day. The city hums around me. Car horns, snippets of conversation, a bicycle bell, someone singing off-key down the block. Life, messy and unapologetic. I step off the curb and into it, not as a victim, not as a headline, but as a woman who is finally, deliberately, learning how to live well.